August 1st, 1996. I record this only to steady my thoughts before the year begins. It is not a diary, merely a place to isolate what cannot be spoken and must not be remembered carelessly. Tomorrow I return to Spinner's End. Narcissa Malfoy seeks me, and Bellatrix attends her. Their desperation will draw me into obligations I would rather refuse, but the path is already narrowing. The coming school year promises strain. Dumbledore weakens, though he hides it behind practiced calm. The Dark Lord grows bolder. Draco Malfoy has been given some reckless task, and Potter, inevitably, will involve himself where he should not. I will write only what is necessary, dates, observations, pressures that must be arranged in order to be endured. The castle will feel different this year, heavy, watching. Something in its foundations anticipates fracture. Tomorrow begins it. Tonight I prepare. August 2nd, 1996. The stench of the river forces its way in through every crack in these walls. It clings to the curtains, to the threadbare armchair, to my skin. Spinner's End was always a place of rot and residue, and tonight it serves its purpose admirably. People avoid rot. People avert their eyes from decay. For my purposes, this is an asset. I have spent the last hour reinforcing the wards around the house, though I know the act is more ritual than protection. Against the Dark Lord, there is no such thing as safety, only delay. Still, a man who ceases to perform the motions of self-preservation has already surrendered more than his life. The charms hum faintly in the air, a net of quiet intent stretched over sagging brick and stained glass. It is sufficient to deter muggles, nosy neighbors, and anyone who comes without focused purpose. It will not stop those who matter. The dark mark beneath my sleeve has been restless, a faint, intermittent irritation at the edge of perception, like an insect burrowing under the skin. Not the full pull of a summons, merely a reminder. A heartbeat in the brand, a pulse that says, you are not forgotten, you are accounted for. You will be collected when needed. It flared more sharply last night as rumors reached even this neglected street. Movement among the Death Eaters, skirmishes, vanishing people, pressure tightening around the Ministry's throat. I am not privy to every detail, and I do not seek them out. To chase news in such times is to invite more weight onto one's shoulders. I am already crushed enough. The Ministry pretends at normalcy. Fudge is departed, replaced by a man who looks less ridiculous in a hat and more ridiculous in his illusions. They scramble to incorporate the Dark Lord's return into their narratives without confessing their own incompetence. Dementors roam where they please. The giants have chosen their side. The werewolves behave exactly as any rational observer would expect. The Order responds with meetings and missions, whispered reports in shabby kitchens and borrowed houses. It is war conducted in corridors and back rooms, with no banners and no glory, only exhaustion. They look to Dumbledore, and Dumbledore occasionally to me. Both sides speak of inevitability. The Dark Lord in terms of conquest, Dumbledore in terms of sacrifice. Both are, in their own fashions, correct. I am positioned between them like a specimen pinned for observations. The difference is that I must perform convincingly for both audiences, while never betraying the other. It is a delicate exercise that leaves no room for error and less for rest. The night outside is thick with damp, each lamppost haloed by mist. I have not lit the street-facing windows. Let the house appear as dead as the rest of the row. The Muggle family 2 doors down argues loudly in that graceless way they have, barking half-thoughts through thin walls. Their world remains bounded by bills, flirtations, minor betrayals. They know someone has gone missing somewhere. They might even mutter about it over the news. But the Dark Lord is, to them, as unreal as any other monster. They rely on the assumption that monsters prefer faraway places and dramatic entry. They do not understand subtlety. They never did. I have laid out my few personal possessions on a small, scarred table by the fire. Several old volumes, a cauldron burnished by years of use, files arranged in a precise line, a jar of something black and viscous that would trouble the Ministry's classification system. On the hearth, a chipped kettle rests above reluctant flames. It is almost comical to juxtapose this domestic scene with the reality that the man in this room is expected by multiple factions to effect outcomes that will alter the course of the war. History may pivot in quiet, unpleasant rooms that smell of river sludge and boiled cabbage. I doubt the chroniclers will be interested. If the summons comes, it will not be unexpected. The Dark Lord is not patient with uncertainty. Dumbledore's maneuvers at the end of last term have forced his hand. Potter's survival at the Ministry was a blow, not because the boy is personally important to the Dark Lord. He is not beyond the prophecy, but because it signaled that the Ministry's denial was cracking. Open conflict becomes less avoidable with each such incident. The Dark Lord will desire assurances. He will want explanations for failure, projections for success, and confirmation that those he once called his most faithful are still worthy of such designation. I have practiced the necessary answers in my head as one rehearses spells, smooth, measured, neither too eager nor too hesitant. To the Dark Lord, I will be the loyal agent deep within Hogwarts, the vigilant watchman on Dumbledore's movements, the one who knows the Order's habits and weaknesses. To Dumbledore, I am already the embedded witness in the Dark Lord's councils, the one who reads changes in tone and gesture, who maps intentions from punishments and reward. Both men trust me more than they should. Both are convinced that they alone perceive my true allegiance. It is astonishing what people will believe when it is convenient. The real allegiance is more complex and considerably less noble than either would like. I am loyal to the outcome that most efficiently thwarts the Dark Lord's ambitions. I am loyal to the memory of a woman long dead, though the sentimentality of that statement disgusts me even as I write it. I am loyal in a grudging and irritated fashion to the slim possibility that the wizarding world might avoid complete descent into barbarism. Dumbledore drapes these calculations in the language of love and redemption. The Dark Lord frames them as power and domination. Stripped of rhetoric, they are equations of risk and cost. I solve them as best I can with the limited variables at my disposal. The mark irritates me again, a brief twist under the skin, not a call. A reminder. I consider the contents of my traveling cloak, folded over the back of the chair, several potions of immediate strategic value, a few defensive trinkets that would amuse Dumbledore and earn a sneer from the Dark Lord, a spare wand that I doubt I will need. If the summons is to a full gathering, I will be expected to stand among familiar faces and note which ones are missing, which ones tremble, which ones are too bold. There are some whose absence I would not mourn. There are others whose presence is an ongoing insult to competence. I am struck, not for the first time, by the utter absence of choice in my present situation. At any point in the last 15 years, I might have stepped off this path. I did not. Some might call that courage. Others would call it cowardice or addiction to suffering. I do not indulge in such categorizations. The simple truth is that each year the cost of retreat increased until it became more intolerable than continued advance. The Dark Lord rewards failure with death. Dumbledore responds to betrayal with a different, quieter annihilation. Between the two, survival lies in staying precisely on the knife edge, bleeding but not yet fallen. The fire gutters. I replenish it with a flick of my wand. The sparks rise, brief and bright, then die, as most things do in this house. I am weary in a manner that has nothing to do with sleep. Sleep brings dreams, and dreams are a luxury I have no time to indulge. One cannot afford to see one's own face clearly and also perform the roles I must play. Outside, the river drags its poised length through the dark. Sooner rather than later there will be a knock at the door, or the mark will blaze, or Dumbledore's Patronus will form in the air and deliver fresh instructions. For now there is only the creak of the house settling into its own decay and the brief respite of being answerable. For a few hours more, to no one. It will not last. August 3rd, 1996. The night has hardly ended. Dawn exists here only as a paler shade of grime leaking through warped glass, and it brings no clarity. I remain at the small table in the sitting room, quill hovering above this page, though my hand feels curiously distant from my mind. Last night's events replayed with an insistence bordering on physical pressure, each detail arranged with intolerable precision. The room still holds their presence. Narcissa's frantic perfume clinging to the threadbare upholstery, Bellatrix's predatory tension embedded in the very air, as though she left fragments of her contempt behind like splinters. I had known Narcissa would come. Desperation is a predictable force, especially in those who have lived their entire lives behind layers of wealth and decorum. She is not built for the Dark Lord's style of cruelty. She lacks the hardened instincts that make survival possible in such a circle. When the knock sounded sharp, wrong for this neighborhood, I felt the mark stir in response before I even stood. Choice ended at that moment. The rest was inevitable. Narcissa's arrival was not the surprise. Bellatrix's intrusion was. She appeared uninvited, as she always does, inserting herself into any space where suspicion may be sown. She delights in cornering others, pressing until they flinch. In my case, she has long sought to expose some imagined weakness or treachery. Her hatred for me is almost academic in its consistency, as if she takes notes on it, revises it, refines it into a discipline. When I opened the door and found her standing behind Narcissa, wand already in hand, her smile thin and feral, I knew the evening would not end without some irrevocable shift. The sitting room had not held so much tension in years. Narcissa was shaking from the moment she crossed the threshold. One hand clutched around her cloak as though bracing against a storm. Bellatrix circled slowly, drinking in the surroundings with a disgust that she did not bother to hide. The cracked walls, the Muggle street beyond, the remnants of my past in every object. She catalogued these with relish, as though they confirmed something long suspected about my unworthiness. Her interrogation followed the expected path. She accused, insinuated, demanded proofs of loyalty. She recited my history like a list of charges. She invoked the Ministry, Dumbledore, even Potter, as though the mere mention of the boy would expose some fracture in my composure. I offered her nothing but the calm she detests most. There are strategies for dealing with Bellatrix. She expects flinching, anger, defensive justifications. She feeds on them. Denying her those reactions starves her, though it also drives her to escalate. And to escalate she did. Narcissa's interjections became more desperate, her voice rising each time Bellatrix's wand lifted. She begged, first for discretion, then for assistance, and finally for my protection over her son. I noted each shift carefully. A mother's pleas produce a specific resonance, one I would prefer never to analyze too closely. Draco's name returned repeatedly, a refrain too sharp to ignore. That alone confirmed what I already suspected. The Dark Lord has given the boy a task far beyond his maturity and skill. It was inevitable that Narcissa would reach for the only weapon available to her, the Unbreakable Vow. Once spoken, the words hung in the air like smoke. Even Bellatrix faltered, momentarily stunned, not by my agreement, but by Narcissa's audacity. My acceptance of the vow was deliberate, measured, and performed in the exact tone required to silence Bellatrix's doubts. It is one thing to play both sides of a war. It is quite another to bind oneself magically to the success of a frightened, inexperienced boy tasked with murder. Bellatrix, ever eager for spectacle, acted as binder with visible delight. Her movements were sharp, ceremonial, and wholly sincere. She had no idea the outcome Dumbledore already anticipated, nor the layers of necessity woven into my choice. When I clasped Narcissa's shaking hands and spoke the vows, I felt the magic bloom cold and constricting around our fingers. Each clause sealed shut with a flare of light, as merciless as iron welding to iron. I will watch over Draco Malfoy. I will protect him as he attempts the Dark Lord's task. If he should fail, I will carry out the deed myself. Those words now bind me more tightly than any mark on my arm. Bellatrix interpreted my acceptance as a triumph for her side, and thus, ironically, eased her suspicion. She does not understand the intricacies of necessity. She sees loyalty only in bloodshed and fear. She will never grasp the true weight of that vow, that by swearing it, I have stepped beyond any possibility of retreat. If Draco falters, and he will, I must kill Dumbledore with my own hand and my own wand, on my own will, or at least under the strongest facsimile of will that obligation can produce. When the vow sealed, I felt something inside me settle into place, not resignation, but alignment, like a series of pieces falling into an inescapable configuration. The Dark Lord will consider it a guarantee of my faith. Dumbledore will see it as the final contingency his plans require. Neither is wrong. After they left, the silence was of a different quality. Not empty, heavy. I sat here, exactly where I sit now, the imprint of Narcissa's frantic grip still lingering on my skin. The mark pulsed lightly, as if approving. I ignored it. The river outside continued its sluggish procession, indifferent to human affairs. There are many kinds of prisons. Some are built from walls and bars, others from promises freely spoken. I have entered one of the latter. The logic is sound, the outcome necessary, the path inevitable. Dumbledore will understand what I have done. He will likely have predicted it. Draco's life, and with it the fragile equilibrium between factions now depends on my capacity to navigate impossibility. I am exhausted, though I slept not at all. My mind calculates consequences automatically, as one works through a well-known potion. If Draco proceeds too quickly, disaster. If too slowly, suspicion. If he hesitates at the final moment, I must step in. And through every scenario, the same conclusion reasserts itself. I am bound to kill the only man who has ever trusted me. There is no sentiment in the statement, only fact. The kettle whistles faintly from the hearth. I let it. The noise fills the room for a moment, then fades, leaving only the soft thrum of magic under my skin and the thin, grey light of a new day that promises nothing worth anticipating. The vow is made. The path is set. There will be no turning back. August 18th, 1996. The air in Dumbledore's office has always been unnaturally still, as though the castle itself hesitates to intrude upon that space. Today, however, even the quiet felt weighted, thickened by the scent of unfamiliar magic and something darker beneath it. The headmaster greeted me with that infuriating semblance of serenity, but the illusion faltered almost immediately. His right hand, gloved though it was, betrayed him. I noticed the blackened edges where damaged flesh met fabric. He made no comment. Of course, he did not. The injury radiated a kind of wrongness that any competent wizard would detect. Not a curse inflicted in battle, not the residue of dark potions, not anything as mundane as hexburn. This was older, deeper, the sort of magic that grows teeth when disturbed. I asked for details only once. He deflected with the sort of mild, grandfatherly evasion that would fool a first year, but not a man who has stood in both the Dark Lord's presence and beneath Dumbledore's regard. Whatever he touched, whatever he attempted, has harmed him in a way he cannot reverse. He knows it. I know it. And we both understand that neither of us will speak plainly of it. The office, cluttered as ever with stranger instruments than even the Department of Mysteries dares to craft, hummed with faint activity. A silver contraption on the desk exhaled wisps of smoke that formed brief, fragmented images before dissolving. A set of brass spheres rotated in erratic orbits above a shallow basin of luminescent water. Fawkes observed us from his perch, feathers duller than I remembered, as if the phoenix, too, sensed a trajectory that could not end well. Dumbledore motioned for me to sit, which I did, though I allowed no relaxation into the chair. He began, in that infuriatingly gentle tone, to speak of the upcoming school year, of staffing, of Slughorn's triumphant return. The man had, as I predicted, succumbed to the lure of comfort and celebrity. Dumbledore insisted his presence would provide advantages in the uncertain year ahead. I did not bother to hide my displeasure. Slughorn's motivations have always been transparent, and his cowardice great. But Dumbledore, with that maddening twinkle that has lost none of its sharpness despite his injury, only smiled as if he knew a joke I was not yet permitted to hear. Then he delivered the real purpose of the meeting, my assignment to the defense against the dark arts position. It was not a request. Dumbledore rarely makes those. He frames commands in the language of opportunity. The post has been denied to me for years, held deliberately out of reach, like a wand held above a child's grasp. I had once believed he mistrusted my ambitions. Later I suspected he feared my methods. Now, as he explained his reasoning with infuriating calm, the truth became plain. He had been saving the position for the moment he deemed it necessary to place me there. He said it was important that I hold the post this year, that circumstances warranted it, that visibility, authority, and proximity to the students, particularly certain students, were essential components of our efforts. The phrase "our efforts" was spoken as though we were aligned in purpose and vision. At that moment, looking at his ruined hand and the subtle wavering at the edges of his voice, I realized he is counting on me in a way that unsettles even my well-honed composure. I asked if he understood the implications. He nodded. Of course he did. The jinxed nature of the defense post is well known. No one lasts longer than a year. Dumbledore, with his unshakable faith in destiny, or perhaps merely his appetite for dramatic symmetry, seems to accept this as a feature rather than an obstacle. He said he believed I was the correct choice at last. I refrained from pointing out that his belated generosity has long been more burden than reward. We both knew what the real issue was. Draco. Dumbledore spoke the boy's name with uncharacteristic gravity. He confirmed what Narcissa's desperation had already made undeniable, that the Dark Lord has given her son a task designed not to be completed, but to kill him. He spoke of it with a sorrow that bordered on anger, and anger in him is far more dangerous than rage in others. He demanded that I watch Draco closely but not intervene prematurely. His phrasing, "not yet," was chosen with surgical precision. I reminded him of the Unbreakable Vow. He did not flinch. He did not scold. He did not question my motives. He merely inclined his head, accepting the inevitability of my action with a calm that bordered on arrogance. He trusts me excessively, blindingly, recklessly. It is almost offensive. He spoke then of the necessity of my cooperation. He did not call it loyalty. Dumbledore rarely uses that word. Instead, he appealed to logic, to outcome, to the greater good he so dearly loves to invoke, though never in those exact terms. He laid out the structure of the year before us, Draco moving toward catastrophe, the Dark Lord watching for signs of failure, the Order needing information only I can obtain, and himself, though he pretended otherwise, weakening in a way that suggests the end is already written. I ask again about his hand. His eyes flickered, just for a moment, and in that flicker lay confirmation. Whatever he is fighting has progressed. Whatever wounded him is not finished. For the first time, I saw in him something dangerously close to mortality, not as an abstract concept, but as a shadow already lodged inside his body. The conversation ended with instructions, layered and precise. I am to monitor Draco. I am to accept the defense post. I am to maintain my cover. I am to provide information when it serves the war, but not at the expense of my position. And I am to be ready for a moment he claims will arrive when both our paths converge once more. Even now, hours later, the phrasing needles at me. When our paths converge, as if that moment is predetermined, as if he knows the shape of it already, as if he expects me to play a role so irrevocable that the thought settles in my stomach like stone. When I left the office, the torches in the corridor flickered violently, though no draught stirred the air. The castle itself seemed to shift around me, as though acknowledging a change in its internal architecture. I descended the staircase slowly, feeling the full weight of the year already pressing against my ribs. Dumbledore's office door closed behind me with its usual softness. It sounded very much like the sealing of a fate. September 1st, 1996. The Hogwarts Express arrived under a sky the color of tarnished metal, the kind of sky that promises storms yet refuses to commit to them. Fitting, perhaps, that the year should open beneath an atmosphere that cannot decide whether to burst or simply linger in threat. Even from the castle gates I could hear the familiar cacophony, trunks dragged, owls shrieking, students returning to their rituals of noise and carelessness. They spilled from the train as though last year's events had been a theatrical performance, not the first shudder of a war that will consume most of them. I made my usual appearance on the platform. Necessary, unfortunately. Visibility ensures a kind of control, or at least the illusion of it. The older students recoiled with the habitual mixture of fear and resentment, while the younger ones gaped as if they had spotted a creature from a grim chapter in their textbooks. I allowed my expression to remain as unreadable as stone. Intimidation is both shield and weapon. It is a relief to wield something Slughorn lumbered beside me, ruddy-faced from the exertion of stepping off the train. He greeted several former Slug Club prospects with an oily enthusiasm that would have made a lesser man cringe. He radiated triumph at reclaiming the potion's position, though he attempted to disguise it with flattery about my finally earning the defense post, as if this rearrangement of roles were a grand favor bestowed upon us both. Dumbledore, in his maddening style, framed the entire affair as beneficial, enriching, strategic. Slughorn accepted this narrative eagerly, wrapped himself in it, and now waddles about as though he has returned from noble exile. Returning to Hogwarts as defense against the dark arts, Professor produced a strange, brief flicker of satisfaction, so faint I nearly missed it. The room itself, high in the tower, contains more ghosts of past instructors than I care to consider. Each of my predecessors left abruptly, catastrophically, or limping. The post is cursed, and I do not use that word lightly. If Dumbledore believes my tenure here is part of his greater design, I will play the role. I have played far worse. During the procession to the castle, I observed the students with a trained eye. Fear sits beneath their excitement, coiling beneath every laugh that rises too sharply. Those who fought in the battle at the Ministry walk with a heaviness that sets them apart. The younger ones study them in naive admiration, having no concept of what it means to hurl spells that can maim. They will learn. Whether they survive the lesson is another matter. Potter stepped off the train with the same mixture of bravado and bitter confusion he carried at the end of last term. The Ministry's belated acceptance of the truth has inflated him somewhat. He carries himself like someone who expects the world to acknowledge his significance. Yet beneath that posture, I saw the same fracture, the same haunted uncertainty he tries to mask with adolescent arrogance. He cast a long, narrow look at Draco, who had disembarked minutes earlier with a swagger that did not reach his eyes, a dynamic already brewing. Potter's instincts, where Draco is concerned, are rudimentary and impulsive. They lack refinement, but not intensity. I will have to watch him more closely than I would prefer. Draco, for his part, looked as though the platform might swallow him whole. His mother's desperation clung to him like a second cloak. He avoided my gaze, a mistake, both of etiquette and strategy. His pallor was pronounced, his posture defensive, his movements too measured. I have known him since he was an arrogant, preening child. This is not the same boy. The Dark Lord's assignment has already begun reshaping him, and not for the better. That particular concern must remain private. Inside the great hall, Dumbledore gave his customary welcome address. Students craned forward, starved for reassurance. Slughorn received a warm introduction. I received a polite acknowledgment. The headmaster's hand remained gloved. Only those who know what to look for noticed the tremor at his wrist. The man grows weaker. He masks it well. But weakness, true weakness, has a scent, subtle, pervasive. It lingers like the aftertaste of dark magic. I recognized it in the air tonight, an unwelcome undercurrent beneath the familiar aroma of roasted meat and lit torches. My appointment to defense provoked a range of expressions along the staff table. Sprout looked disappointed, Flitwick mildly relieved, and Hagrid confused, though that is his natural state. Minerva met my eyes briefly. Her gaze held something like apprehension, either for me or for what my presence in that position signifies. She is too perceptive for her own peace of mind. The feast blurred into tedium. Endless chatter, nervous laughter, the scrape of cutlery. My attention remained elsewhere. The castle itself felt altered, more restless than in recent years. The wards responded to my presence with unfamiliar sensitivity, as though assessing whether I remain a protector or a threat. Perhaps they no longer know the difference. Perhaps neither do I. Later, as students poured from the hall toward their dormitories, I remained behind a moment longer. The torches sputtered, their flames stretched by an unseen draught. Dumbledore lingered near the staff table, speaking to Minerva in low tones. When he glanced at me, I saw in his eyes a fraction of a second only, a weariness so profound it could have been centuries old. Yet when he addressed the departing students, his voice regained its irritating buoyancy. These shifts in him have become more frequent, more alarming, and more carefully disguised. Walking the corridors afterward, I felt the familiar rhythm of the castle under my boots. Stone steeped in centuries of occupation, staircases groaning with old endowments, portraits muttering among themselves like aging scholars discussing a treatise no one else has read. The air was damp, metallic, touched by the mineral scent of the lake. It comforted me once. This year, the atmosphere carries a different texture, like cold breath gathering before a blow. Minute classroom awaited in the defense tower. I entered it briefly, lit only by the ambient light filtering through narrow windows. Dust swirled in the air, the remnants of last year's chaos barely concealed. Scratched desks, forgotten spell residue etched into the floor, the ghosts of lessons gone catastrophically wrong, appropriate, fitting, even. I traced the edge of the professor's desk with one hand. The wood was worn smooth by too many hands, too many short-lived instructors, a cursed position, a cursed year, a cursed vow hanging around my wrist like a tightening shackle. Outside the windows, lightning flickered faintly over the forbidden forest, illuminating the treetops in brief silver flashes. The storm has not yet broken. It waits, so does everything else. The year has begun, and already the air tastes of inevitability. September 14th, 1996. The castle has settled into its term-time rhythm, though the rhythm is uneven, an irregular heartbeat beneath the stone. In previous years, by this point, the initial frenzy of returning students would have tapered into complacency. Not this year. They move through the corridors with forced cheer, as though aware of some distant, approaching tremor, but unwilling to acknowledge it aloud. Even the portraits observe them with sharper attention, whispering among themselves as if taking attendance for a coming storm. My days have been divided between the defense classroom and the corridors where shadows lengthen earlier than they should. Teaching the subject Dumbledore, withheld from me for so long, brings a certain grim satisfaction. But the work itself demands vigilance. The students behave as though the material is a novelty. They respond eagerly to instruction, encounter curses, and shield spells, though enthusiasm is never a guarantee of competence. Their minds drift to the ministry battle, and though they would never admit it, many of them are desperate for the belief that skill alone can protect them from what lies outside the school's crumbling illusions of safety. My focus, however, has not been on the classroom. Draco has begun the term with an odd, brittle determination that would almost pass for resolve if not for the agitation beneath it. He walks through the halls as though expecting an attack at any moment, not from his peers, but from fate itself. His complexion has taken on a greyish tone, the pallor of one who sleeps poorly and eats without appetite. He avoids my eyes whenever we cross paths, which only serves to draw more attention to his behavior. I have intercepted him on several occasions, but he offers excuses so thin they might have been constructed from mist. His occlumency, barriers, once merely sloppy, now resemble crumbling masonry. Patchwork attempts at concealment, riddled with fissures. I see flashes of panic behind the practiced sneer, small fractures in the facade that betray the enormity of the task thrust upon him. He refuses guidance, refuses subtle intervention, refuses every opportunity I offer him to mitigate the danger of his own incompetence. Of course he refuses. Pride is the last asset available to him, and pride is a shield that shatters under real force. But the unbreakable vow binds me more tightly than his delusions of independence. I cannot allow him to break entirely. The magic coils around my wrist in quiet, insistent memory, reminding me that if Draco falters, I must intervene. I must complete whatever the Dark Lord required of him. The weight of that magic pulses more strongly each time Draco's behavior worsens. Potter remains as irritating as ever, though regrettably he is not wrong about Draco's strangeness. I have overheard the boy muttering accusations, attempting to enlist others in his suspicions, prowling the corridors at times when even the portraits sleep. His fixation is driven by equal parts fear and arrogance, yet it is grounded in something. He senses Draco's unraveling in the way animals sense approaching storms. I dismiss him publicly. I must. The classroom dynamic demands it, but dismissing him does not erase the truth he circles. Potter's attention has become problematic. He watches Draco with an intensity bordering on obsession. Every stolen glance from one becomes a narrowed glare from the other. I see the pattern forming between them, fear sharpening into hostility, hostility into reckless pursuit. If Potter pushes Draco too hard, the boy may make a mistake. If Draco lashes back, Potter may provoke disaster. The conflict between them, once childish, has evolved into something dangerously real. I keep my distance when possible. Too great an interest in their feud would invite questions from all the wrong directions. The dark mark has been intermittently active this week, not the searing summons of a meeting, but a low thrum of awareness that sinks beneath the skin and lingers. The other Death Eaters must be feeling it too. The Dark Lord does not announce his plans, but he rarely stirs the mark without purpose. Whatever Draco has been tasked with, it is likely only one piece of a broader pattern. I have attempted to gather more subtle information through the usual channels, fragments of conversation, the occasional intercepted owl, shifts in Slytherin house dynamics, but Draco reveals nothing, not even to his closest friends. He moves among them like a figure carved from ash. The other Slytherins sense the change. Some give him space out of respect, others out of fear. None confront him. They are cowards, but they are perceptive cowards. This afternoon, I caught him slipping out of a corridor near the 7th floor with the startled air of someone interrupted. His wand was still in his hand. He muttered something about prefect duties, though he was nowhere near the patrol routes assigned for the day. When I asked him what he was doing there, he replied with a practiced sharpness, his indignation almost convincing. But behind the facade, there was a moment, just a moment, when I saw raw desperation flicker in his eye. The room of requirement lies in that corridor, concealed from those who do not know how to ask for it. Draco does not yet realize that I'd recognize the signs of someone probing its protections. He assumes the castle bends only to his will. He forgets that I, too, have spent decades navigating its subtleties. Whatever he works on, whatever impossible task he has been assigned, he has chosen that room as his sanctuary. Yet the castle will not betray him. Not unless he is careless, and he is getting careless. The castle fees it as well. I have observed odd fluctuations in the castle wards, the faintest distortion near certain doorways, a pulse that suggests an unauthorized use of advanced magic somewhere within the building. The distortions are weak, intermittent, but unmistakable. Draco is making attempts, likely crude ones, to manipulate magic beyond his understanding. I find myself watching the skies more frequently. The horizon has been swollen with clouds that refuse to break. The air is too heavy, too still, as though the castle itself is holding its breath. Even the suits of armor seem to clatter more sharply as they shift in their alcoves, metal grinding against stone in disapproval. Tonight, I walked the length of the 7th floor corridor alone. The torches guttered as I passed, low, uncertain flames that warped the shadows into grotesque shapes along the wall. When I reached the blank stretch of stone opposite the tapestry of Barnabas, the balmy, I paused. The room did not reveal itself. It felt aware, closed, guarded, as though protecting a secret it had not yet finished shaping. I suspect Draco is not merely exploring possibilities. He is constructing something, repairing something, attempting something far beyond his schooling. The Unbreakable Vow coils again beneath my sleeve, tightening with recognition. This is only the beginning. Draco moves toward a precipice, Potter toward an obsession, and Dumbledore toward a fate he will not articulate. The castle feels it. The shadows feel it. The air in every corridor tastes of tension that grows sharper by the day. We are all being pulled toward something, and the path is steepening. October 5th, 1996. The first truly cold wind of the year swept in last night, rattling the windows of the Slytherin dormitories and carrying with it the sharp taints of the lake. Autumn has advanced with an abruptness that feels almost theatrical. The leaves outside have browned overnight. The sky carries an iron weight. The season mirrors Draco's condition with uncomfortable accuracy. What was merely strained weeks ago is now fraying in earnest. He is unraveling, I have watched him from a distance these past days, not because I prefer distance, though I do, but because proximity does him no good. Each time I speak to him, he stiffens like a stag cornered by hounds. His eyes dart, his hands twitch, and his words emerge with the brittle sharpness of someone reciting lines rehearsed in solitude. He is no longer merely evasive. He is afraid, and fear, when pushed into a boy raised on pride instead of discipline, expresses itself in the worst possible ways. His absences from meals have become routine. I have seen him slip out of classes early under transparent pretenses of illness or prefect business, both of which would have insulted my intelligence had I not already known the cause. His fellow Slytherins whisper about him behind tapestries, but their whispers carry no real concern, only the curiosity of predators circling a wounded sibling. Crabbe and Goyle follow Draco at a distance, uncertain and useless, their loyalty little more than a memory from childhood. They sense the change, but lack the capacity to interpret it. The faculty, as usual, are oblivious. They see Draco's pallor and believe it to be stress, or the ordinary foolishness of adolescence. Even Minerva, who prides herself on observational acuity, has dismissed the signs as the remnants of last year's ordeal. She does not understand that the Dark Lord recognizes no such category as trauma. He does not leave wounds. He leaves debts. Draco carries the weight of one he never incurred and cannot possibly repay. The dark mark has been subtly active these nights, not a summons, but a stirring, as though testing the alertness of those bound to it. I can only assume the Dark Lord is adjusting his plans, tightening his web. He has always preferred his pieces in motion, and Draco is one such piece. Small, fragile, placed deliberately in the most dangerous position imaginable. It is a miracle the boy has not yet broken, or perhaps he has begun to. Yesterday, I confronted him in the corridor outside the library. He had emerged looking hollow, his expression twisted in frustration. His posture, stiff, defensive, suggested he had spent the hour wrestling with some task beyond his skill. When I addressed him, he startled as though struck. He attempted to compose himself, muttering about studying for Ned W.T.'s. It was an excuse so flimsy it collapsed under its own weight. I pressed, not overtly, but with enough pressure to signal that his behavior is noticed. He recalled. A flash of raw panic sparked in his eyes before he shuttered his expression behind the familiar Malfoy arrogance. The facade did not hold. His voice cracked when he insisted that he needed no assistance. He fled. I allowed him to. Pursuing him would do nothing but push him further into irrational defiance. The Vow, however, cares nothing for tact. It coils around my wrist at odd intervals, a silent reminder that failure is no longer theoretical. I can almost feel it warming when Draco's panic spikes, as though the magic recognizes the trajectory of events. The bond does not think, but it senses. It anticipates. It presses. If Draco falters, I must act. The thought has become a constant whisper at the edge of my mind, quiet, patient, relentless. I do not have the luxury of ignoring it. Every missed meal, every trembling hand, every hurried whisper with fellow Slytherins is a stone placed on the scale that measures how long the boy can maintain the illusion of control. I walked the 7th floor corridor again this week, passing the tapestry of Barnabas, the balmy. The air there feels altered, as though magic has been disturbed recently and not yet settled back into its usual patterns. Draco has been attempting something in that vicinity, attempting and failing repeatedly. He leaves behind the faintest traces of magic, half-formed, incomplete, and sometimes dangerously volatile. When I paused outside the blank stretch of wall, the castle seemed to hold its breath. The room of requirement did not open. It is loyal to the one who seeks it, not the one who tracks the seeker. Time is running thin. Harry Potter, meanwhile, gnaws at the edges of this situation with maddening enthusiasm. His fixation on Draco has grown teeth. He watches the boy with an intensity that would almost be commendable were it not fueled by a mixture of adolescent paranoia and self-importance. He casts glances at me, too, those narrow, accusing stares in which he attempts to pierce secrets he cannot possibly fathom. He suspects Draco of something. He suspects me of something. In both cases, he is correct, though not in any way he could articulate. In class, Potter has been uncharacteristically focused. His spell work has improved, not through talent, but through a sudden precision that is unfamiliar. He implements techniques without knowing why they are effective, without understanding their origins. His execution resembles the handwriting in the margins of a book I once annotated. It is an echo I cannot prove, but one I recognize with an uncomfortable immediacy. I am certain now that he is using someone's notes. I am almost certain that they are mine. When I observe him cast certain defensive spells, improperly but effectively, I feel the past rise like bile. The boy plays with remnants of my own innovations, ignorant of their provenance. The irony is almost grotesque, but I cannot confront him directly, not yet. To expose the truth prematurely would invite questions from Dumbledore, from the Order, and worst of all, from the Dark Lord. Questions I cannot afford. I must tread carefully. As always, Dumbledore's health continues to deteriorate, though he hides it with stubborn grace. Students see only the beard, the spectacles, the benevolence. But I see the shadows beneath his eyes, the slight tremor in his left hand when he believes no one is watching. I have replenished the potions he requires, but they do little more than slow the progression of the curse. The blackened flesh of his hand is a warning. Time is as limited for him as it is for Draco. Two sides of a collapsing equation. The year grows colder. The halls smell faintly of damp parchment and extinguished torches. Every night, fog curls over the lake in pale, skeletal tendrils reaching toward the castle walls. Draco is at the center of something he cannot control. Potter circles him like a predator sensing weakness. Dumbledore walks toward a fate he already accepts. And I, bound by oath, loyalty, and necessity, stand between forces that will tear this castle open before the year ends. The storm outside has begun its slow advance. The one inside these walls is not far behind. October 28th, 1996. The wind has sharpened into a blade these past nights, turning the castle battlements into instruments that hum uneasily with each gust. Even within the walls the cold has found purchase, slipping beneath robes and sinking into the bones of the place. Tonight, Dumbledore summoned me long after curfew, the hour when the castle sleeps, when the torches dim and silence gathers thickly in the corridors like dust. I knew, before stepping into his office, that something had worsened. The scent of the room struck me first. There is a kind of magic that leaves a trace in the air, an acrid, metallic undertone that speaks of curses old enough to predate the school itself. The smell was stronger tonight than ever before. Dumbledore's hand lay exposed on the desk between us, the blackened skin stretched thin over bones, the curse creeping like ink beneath the surface. It has progressed. He pretended otherwise. He attempted to greet me with that infuriating lightness he keeps in reserve for moments when gravity should dominate. But the effort cost him. I saw it, if only for an instant, in the tightening around his eyes and the faint tremor running through the uninjured hand as he reached for a quill. His health is deteriorating at a rate even he cannot obscure much longer. Whatever he encountered, the ring, though he has not yet spoken the word aloud in my presence, is feasting on him. He spoke first of Draco. His information, as usual, was both too little and precisely targeted. He asked if I had observed the boy's increasing agitation. I confirmed it. He asked if Draco had made any progress on his task. I did not answer directly. We played the familiar game, he asking questions already knowing fragments of the truth, I supplying fragments of answers without admitting how much more I know than the staff, how much less I know than I require. He stated, calmly, with no trace of condemnation, that Draco's recent attempt was a dangerous escalation. Katie Bell's cursed necklace had arrived earlier this month, delivering the horror of the Dark Lord's intentions into the heart of the school. The staff reacted as expected. Shock, outrage, unnecessary panic. Dumbledore alone maintained composure. He asked me tonight if I had gleaned anything further from the incident. I had not. Draco has grown more secretive since his failure. His guilt sits on him like frost, visible to anyone who knows how to look. Yet, Dumbledore insisted on restraint. He forbade me from direct interference, though he did not phrase it as such. He rarely commands. He merely frames refusal as unthinkable. He said the time was not yet right. I did not dignify this statement with argument. The time is never right for children to play at murder, yet Dumbledore seems to believe there is utility, even necessity, in allowing Draco to reach the brink unaided. He sees something in the boy that I cannot, or he sees something in the future that he refuses to share. His withholding is no longer strategic, it is dangerous. When I pressed carefully about the nature of his injury, he smiled with the maddening serenity of a man presenting a riddle. He claimed the damage was contained for the present, a lie. Contained curses do not crawl. They do not pulse with that hungry, creeping vitality I observed beneath his skin. They do not dull the eyes of a wizard who once possessed a gaze sharp enough to dissect a person's entire life with a single glance. He spoke of lessons with Potter, memories, past connections, threads from Tom Riddle's life being woven into some larger tapestry. He did not elaborate, though the patterns were obvious, even from fragments. Dumbledore is constructing a narrative for the boy, one that extends far beyond this castle, far beyond the present conflict. His secrecy is not a matter of trust. It is a matter of orchestration. He is shaping Potter, preparing him for something with stakes so high they overshadow even the immediate war. I do not know what role he expects Potter to play, nor why he refuses to speak plainly. But the Headmaster's reticence is increasing, not decreasing. He keeps me close, yet keeps me blind. A curious contradiction, one I find less tolerable as the year advances. His questions shifted, as they always do, back toward observation. Had I noticed any changes in the castle's magical current? Small fluctuations, disturbances? He suspects something larger at work. So do I, but the castle reveals itself sparingly, and whatever Draco is attempting in that 7th-floor room has begun distorting the surrounding magic. The air feels thinner there, charged, as though a barrier is being forced open from the inside. Dumbledore asked if I sensed it. I admitted I had. He nodded, unsurprised, then dismissed the topic entirely, as though he had only been confirming a hypothesis. His focus, always returning more sharply than expected, came once more to Draco. "He is growing desperate," Dumbledore observed. It was not a question, I agreed. He must not succeed. Again, not a question. Again, I agreed. But in the next breath, he added what he always adds, with that quiet, maddening certainty that speaks of plans already set in motion. "Nor must he die for it. He trusts me to ensure this impossible balance. He trusts me to uphold a vow he did not witness, did not sanction, yet fully anticipated. It is a trust that weighs more heavily than any curse. I have never asked for it. He has never withdrawn it. And now, as his strength bleeds away into shadow, that trust tightens like a rope." The meeting ended only when it became clear that his composure was beginning to fail. His voice thinned. His focus wavered, just slightly. Fawkes shifted on his perch, feathers rustling with unease. I recognized the signs. I excused myself before the headmaster could fracture under my scrutiny. As I left, I paused at the top of the staircase. Behind the closed door, I sensed, not heard, the faintest catch of Dumbledore's breath, pain, or fatigue, or both. The castle was dark on the walk back to my chambers, the torches guttering as I passed. The portraits, usually insufferable after dark, feigned sleep. Even the suits of armor stood oddly still. Dumbledore weakens. Draco accelerates. The Dark Lord watches. And I, caught between an oath, a weakening master, and a spiraling boy, must walk a path that narrows with every passing night. The wind howls through the highest windows. The storm is not yet here, but its shadows precede it. November 21st, 1996. A castle has taken on that brittle stillness that accompanies early winter. A tension that settles between stones and in the spaces beneath stairwells, as though the ancient building is holding its breath. It is not silent. Hogwarts is never silent, but the sounds have changed. Timbre footsteps echo too sharply, whispers travel too far, and the portraits have grown strangely watchful. Their conversations clipped short at the sight of any passer-by. Even the suits of armor seem heavier, less ornamental and more sentinels awaiting instructions. In the midst of this strained quiet, the incident with the necklace erupted like a rent in fabric, revealing threads of danger woven more deeply than most of the occupants of this castle will ever comprehend. Katie Bell's scream still hangs in the air, if one is inclined to listen for echoes. The image of her body lifted by invisible force, contorted as if puppeteered by a malicious hand, is not one easily dismissed. Curses of that nature do not merely injure, they speak. They declare intent. And that necklace, that ornate, deceptively delicate thing, carried a command meant for no one but Dumbledore. When the girl touched it, the curse swarmed her like a nest of serpents disturbed in their sleep. That she survived long enough to reach the hospital wing is an indictment of Draco's inexperience, not his mercy. The magic was volatile, powerful, yes, but unfocused. It lashed out at the first available target rather than seeking its intended victim. A competent assassin would have secured the chain, contained the magic, ensured delivery to its precise destination. Draco's attempt was clumsy, frantic, and born of inexpert haste. I recognized the signs instantly. The staff gathered in the hospital wing afterward, their voices rising in a predictable chorus of concern and outrage. Slughorn wrung his hands, muttering platitudes about tragic accidents, while casting nervous glances toward Dumbledore every few seconds, as though awaiting absolution for the simple fact of being present. Minerva's composure cracked at the ideas. She spoke sharply, demanding answers from a situation that offered none. Even Madame Pomfrey, who has seen more horrors than most aurors, worked in grim silence, her lips pressed into a line that deepened with every flick of her wand over the girl. They see danger as something external, something that invades. They have not yet accepted that it lives within the walls, now moves through corridors, disguised as a student with a surname that once offered protection. Dumbledore, of course, responded with infuriating calm. He delivered reassurances with the measured rhythm of a man reciting lines he has spoken 100 times before. He speculated on accidents, mischief, tragic mishandling, all the interpretations designed to quell panic. His tone carried authority enough that the others bowed to it. Only he and I understood the truth embedded beneath his words. This was no accident. This was an assassination attempt, or rather, the botched rehearsal of one. I examined the remnants of the curse myself after the others dispersed. The magic clung stubbornly to the necklace, as if resentful of being interrupted before fulfilling its purpose. It bore the unmistakable signature of an unpracticed hand wielding dangerous tools. Threads of dark enchantment tangled with raw, unshielded emotion. Draco's involvement was obvious in every jagged edge of the splash. He is attempting to command lethal magic with the desperation of someone drowning, reaching for any weapon at hand regardless of the cost. When I later confronted him quietly in a deserted stretch of corridor, he refused to meet my eyes. He played at indignation, muttering denials through clenched teeth, but the tremor in his hands rendered the performance hollow. His guilt clung to him like frost. He is terrified, and terror has never sat well on him. It corrodes his arrogance. Leaving behind a brittle shell he clings to with increasing recklessness. Draco is not merely afraid of failure, he is afraid of being seen failing, and that fear drives him to moves that grow more dangerous each time. The vow, as always, pulses faintly when he reaches this threshold, a reminder, a tether, a sentence wearing the mask of obligation. Its magic hums low under my skin, recognizing his fear, anticipating outcomes no sane person would name aloud. If Draco dies attempting this task, I die with him. If he fails, I must carry out the work he was given. There is no escape clause, no renegotiation. Every misstep he makes tightens the rope around both our throats. And yet Dumbledore tells me, not advises, not suggests, but tells me to let him proceed. Not yet, he repeated when I raised concerns this evening. The phrase slides off his tongue with the softness of falling ash, but its implications settle with the weight of stone. He insists that Draco must reach the limits of his task himself. He speaks of consequences, of inevitabilities, of mercy twisted into forms that would make most men flinch. But he shares none of the structure behind these claims. He walks through the year as though consulting a map only he can read, and he expects the rest of us to follow the path blindly, confident that he will reveal the destination when the moment suits him. I watched him closely tonight. His hand blackened, cursed, withering, trembled when he lifted a goblet. He steadied it quickly, but not quickly enough to fool someone who has studied the precise calibration of his composure. The curse is spreading. It gnaws at him relentlessly. That he has retained this much strength is not a triumph of magic, but sheer force of will. There is something he is not telling me about the ring, something crucial, but his silence is deliberate. He shields me from the complete picture, even as he demands that I play a central role in it. Piss trust is both weapon and burden. As I left the office, the castle corridors seemed narrower, the shadows deeper. A draught curved around a bend, extinguishing a torch as though exhaling. Students whispered nearby, fearful, excited, oblivious to the shape of the noose tightening around them. The scent of snow lingered faintly in the air, though none has yet fallen. Katie Bell lies unconscious in the hospital wing, suspended between life and death by a curse meant for the strongest wizard alive. Draco skulks through the castle, hollow-eyed and frantic, building a tower of desperate decisions that will eventually collapse under its own instability. Dumbledore weakens, hides it, persists, and gives nothing away except the knowledge that not yet carries more weight each time he says it. And I walk the length of this tightening corridor, bound by a vow that feels less like a bond and more like a countdown. Winter approaches quickly. The first snowfall will likely arrive soon. But long before the snow covers the grounds, blood will descend December 6th, 1996. The castle has entered that stagnant stretch between autumn's decline and winter's deepening, when the air carries the barest trace of frost and every corridor feels subtly constricted, as though the walls themselves anticipate some approaching violence. Students shuffle through their routines with forced levity, pretending at normalcy while the tension beneath their movements grows more pronounced. I have long believed that young people possess a crude form of intuition, blunt, undisciplined, but not entirely ineffective. They can sense, even without comprehension, that something in the school has shifted. Their laughter has become hollow. Their mischief lacks its former spontaneity. The atmosphere is thick with unspoken dread. Against this strained backdrop, Potter has become competent, alarming in itself. In the span of a few weeks, his attempts at potion-making, once a spectacle of mediocrity, have transformed into work that displays precision, improvisational agility, and an awareness of ingredient properties far beyond his demonstrated capacity. Slughorn, predictably, is delighted. He parades Potter's success as evidence of his own magnificent teaching, a claim so grotesquely self-congratulatory that I can barely tolerate occupying the same room when he voices it. The man has mistaken luck for tutelage and attributed Potter's sudden advancement to his own returning brilliance, as though the boy simply needed an appreciative audience in order to blossom. But I know better. I recognize the marks of my own instruction when I see them, even when they are filtered through adolescent fumbling. I recognize the effects of certain alterations, those subtle, dangerous improvements I once made to standard recipes, refining steps to increase potency or eliminate unnecessary waste. I see the boy slicing saprophoros beans with a method I devised in my youth, a motion so efficient and counterintuitive that no textbook, not even advanced ones, teaches it. I see him adding infusions at precisely the moment that maximizes the reaction's stabilization, a technique I annotated into my own margins decades ago. These are not coincidences. They are fingerprints. Someone has given Potter a book, and not merely any annotated text, but one bearing my private notes, my handwriting, my innovations, my mistakes. The realization struck with an unpleasant clarity the first time Potter executed a perfect draft of peace under Slughorn's clumsy supervision. He did not hesitate at the crucial juncture, did not look to the board or to Slughorn for guidance. He moved with the assurance of someone following a set of directions that had proven themselves repeatedly. Directions he trusts because they work. Directions I wrote. It is a peculiar kind of violation to see one's intellectual legacy appropriated by a child who neither understands nor deserves it. I feel, though I will not indulge the sentiment, something dangerously close to intrusion. My past, resurrected without my consent, wandering through Potter's hands like a ghost wearing borrowed skin. He wields my knowledge without context, without respect for the dangers embedded within. He has no understanding of the darker margin notes I once scribbled, in moments of youthful arrogance, no comprehension of which improvements are harmless, and which skirt the edges of legal or ethical boundary. There are spells hidden between those pages that no 16-year-old should possess. Some that no wizard, regardless of age, should possess. My suspicions were confirmed in class 2 days ago. Potter, in an uncharacteristic moment of intellectual curiosity, brewed a finite boosting tincture using an adjustment to the base that only I have ever recorded. A tiny quantity of mistletoe resin added too early in the process. The modification forces the potion to rupture impurities, which improves outcomes for those who lack fine control. It is useful, yes, but dangerously temperamental, and Potter used it flawlessly. At that moment, I knew with certainty that he was not simply being coached. He was following instructions written by someone who intimately understood the flaws of the original recipe. Someone like myself. It is laughable, really, that my past has resurfaced in this form. I once believed I had outgrown the reckless creativity of my youth. I abandoned those scribbled notebooks, believing them lost or meaningless. But apparently, in this castle, which hoards secrets with more possessiveness than any dragon, nothing ever truly disappears, least of all mistakes. Potter has no idea what he is handling. That much is clear. His confidence has inflated in direct correlation with his success, and he carries himself now with a kind of swagger that is both predictable and nauseating. The other students whisper about his supposed genius, attributing his sudden prowess to natural talent rather than the borrowed intellect of someone far more capable. It is almost grotesque to watch Slughorn beam at him, oblivious to how thoroughly he is being manipulated by his own desperate need to collect the famous and gifted. What alarms me more than Potter's improvement, however, is the danger that lies dormant within those pages. The spells I experimented with then were not all benign. Some were merely advanced, others were reckless, untested, bordering on catastrophic. If he continues to explore the margins, he may find enchantments designed for duels, for incapacitation, for harm. Spells I abandoned, not because they failed, but because I grew older and realized that just because one can create something does not mean one should. Potter is incapable of such reasoning. He will try anything written in a book he admires, The irony is bitter in his hands. My past innovations, constructed during a period of intellectual fervor and deeply misguided ambition, have become tools of mastery. Tools that inflate his ego and threaten to draw him into danger he will not recognize until it is too late. I must intervene. Yet to do so openly would expose too much. Dumbledore would ask questions I cannot answer. The Dark Lord might hear whispers and draw conclusions that could unravel everything, and Potter would not listen. He has constructed me as his enemy, the one obstacle between him and whatever heroic narrative he believes himself destined to fulfill. If I press him, he will cling to the book with even greater fervor. No, subtlety is required. I will find a way to uncover the book without alerting him to the significance of what he possesses. I must see it with my own eyes, confirm its identity, determine what dangers he has already explored and which yet remain hidden from his ignorant enthusiasm. Tonight, the castle smells faintly of snow, though none has fallen. The air in the corridors carries a strange metallic edge, as though the wards themselves are bracing for impact. Potter strides through these halls with borrowed power and misplaced confidence. Draco scurries through them with desperation he cannot mask, and Dumbledore grows thinner, fading slowly beneath the weight of a curse he claims is contained. Everything tightens, narrows, spirals. Potter plays with fire he does not understand, and I, forced to watch the embers from both sides of the war, feel the first hints of heat rising from my own past, rekindled in hands that have no business holding it. December 24th, 1996. Christmas Eve has draped the castle in its usual veneer of charm. Garlands suspended between marble pillars, wreaths hung with holly berries that gleam like drops of coagulated blood, and warm candlelight flickering against the frostbitten window. Students who remain through the holiday attempt to summon cheerfulness, their laughter echoing thinly through the halls like songs played on cracked instruments. The emptiness of the castle amplifies every sound. Each footstep seems too loud, each voice too brittle. Even the ghosts drift more slowly, their movements muted by the weight of the season. For most, this night is meant to signify warmth and respite. For me, it is simply a quieter battlefield. The absence of students lends the corridors a clarity not present during term time. Their chatter no longer obscures the subtle undercurrents of magic that course through the walls. Tonight, the castle feels older, its stone exhaling centuries of memory into the cold air. The stillness is deceptive, like a lung held in anticipation before a scream. Draco did not attend Slughorn's holiday gathering tonight, a fact that escaped no one's attention, though only a few possessed the sense to wonder why. His absence has become routine, but the rhythm of his avoidance has shifted in recent days. He is no longer merely evasive, he is disappearing. He slips through the castle like smoke, seen only by those who know where to look. On the rare occasions I catch sight of him, he appears thinner still, his face gaunt with sleeplessness, the skin beneath his eyes shadowed and drawn. He flinches at footsteps behind him. He moves as though time itself is pursuing him. The Vow responds to his deterioration with a faint, insistent throb, barely perceptible but impossibly persistent. It is not pain, not exactly, more like a reminder pressed against the nerves, as though the magic itself draws breath each time Draco falters. I have learned to ignore it to the extent that ignoring a tightening noose is possible. The Vow will not relent. It waits with the patience of something that knows it will be fulfilled. Slughorn, in the dining hall earlier, prattled about his elegant little soiree, a nauseating display of self-indulgence involving crystallized pineapple, charmed lanterns, and an ill-advised punch that smelled potent enough to etch glass. He boasted of Potter's progress, which he takes credit for, naturally, and attempted once again to invite me to his gatherings. I declined with my customary disdain. Celebrations are not only pointless, they're dangerous distractions. Potter, predictably, attended. He thrives on Slughorn's attention, though he pretends not to. The boy has developed a new kind of arrogance since his potion's triumphs began. An undercurrent of self-satisfaction that coats his expressions like a sheen of oil. He still watches Draco with that obsessive scrutiny, and though he masks it poorly, his conviction has deepened. He knows something is wrong. His instincts, clumsy though they are, press against the edges of truth, and truth, in the hands of someone as impulsive as Potter, becomes weapon rather than insight. I passed him in the corridor earlier in the evening. He was alone, returning from one of Slughorn's sugary gatherings, and carrying himself with a swagger I find increasingly intolerable. He greeted me with stiff hostility, muttered something defensive before I even spoke, as though expecting reprimand. His guilt was almost palpable, a flicker in the eye, a sudden tightening of the shoulders. That cursed book remains in his possession. The arrogance in his gaze is fueled by knowledge that does not belong to him. If he continues to use those spells, those adjustments, those inventions of mine, no, that path requires close observation, and sooner rather than later, confrontation. But tonight is not about Potter. Tonight the castle itself demands attention. The weather turned sharply as evening fell, leaving a thin crust of ice along the windows of the great hall. The lake outside the grounds has begun to freeze along the edges, forming pale crescents beneath the moonlight. Fog clings to the surface in ragged strips, drifting across the grounds like spectral remnants of something long forgotten. It gives the impression that the castle floats within a bowl of clouded glass. During my patrol of the empty corridors, I found myself drawn again to the 7th floor. There is something magnetic about that stretch of wall, something that hums with a low, pulsing energy each time one passes. Draco has been working in that room again. I can feel the pressure in the air, the faint static of magic manipulated and misaligned. Tonight the door remained hidden, the wall perfectly blank, but the castle's silence there is deceptive. It is the silence of a creature listening. I do not know what progress Draco has made, nor how close he is to success or catastrophic failure. He guards his movements with increasing paranoia, checking behind him like a hunted animal. His desperation is growing sharper, more frantic. He is slipping, and the vow tightens with each slip. I cannot intervene yet. Dumbledore's instructions remain as maddening as ever. Observe, do not obstruct, not yet. Always the same phrase. Always the same infuriating certainty in his voice. But tonight, when I delivered the potions he required, brews I have refined repeatedly to stave off the creeping cur, I saw something in him that disturbed me more deeply than the decay of his hand. He was calm, too calm, a quiet, resigned calm, like a man who has placed his final piece on the board and accepted that no moves remain beyond the one he has decided to make. He spoke softly, his words measured and deliberate, and though he did not say it outright, I sensed the shape of the truth beneath them. He has already decided that his life is a resource to be expended. I left the office feeling a cold that had nothing to do with winter. Now, as I write, the corridors lie empty. The torches burn lower than usual, their flames barely reaching upward, shivering in the cold draughts that serpent through the stairwells. A few distant voices rise from the common rooms, forced cheer, muffled laughter, the brittle mirth of children seeking comfort in celebration. They do not understand that dread can outlast any festive charm. Draco hides in his secret room. Potter clutches a book that should never have reached his hands. And Dumbledore, who has always seemed as immutable as the castle itself, diminishes slowly, quietly, inevitably. I look toward the window as I finish this entry. Snow has begun to fall at last. Thin, fine flakes that drift like dust in slanted patterns across the panes. The night is silent except for the faint groan of the castle settling into its ancient bones. Christmas Eve, a night for peace, if one believes in such nonsense. But peace is not what walks these corridors. Not this year, not for any of us. January 12th, 1997. The castle feels strangely hollow after the holidays, a cavern of stone filled with echoes rather than inhabitants. The students returned 3 days ago, their voices spilling into the corridors with the brittle energy of those eager to resume old habits. Yet beneath their noise lies an undercurrent of unease that has only deepened since the attack on Katie Bell. Their laughter rings too sharply. Their steps fall too quickly, and even their quarrels carry an edge of something strained and uncertain. Hogwarts in midwinter is usually a place of predictable monotony, but this year the very air tastes different. Colder, more metallic, touched with an electrical charge that lingers at the back of the throat. Into this atmosphere Draco returns, like a shadow cast too long and stretched too thin. The boy is further diminished, pale to the point of translucence. Eyes ringed with sleepless hollows, jaw clenched so tightly it appears carved from stone. His movements lack their former arrogance. Instead, he moves with the furtive intensity of someone expecting pursuit at any moment. His fellow Slytherins attempt to ignore the transformation, though I see the flickers of fear and suspicion in their glances. Even Crabbe and Goyle, who once trailed him with the mindless loyalty of dogs, now hover uneasily at his periphery, unsure whether to assist or to fear him. His efforts to conceal his activities have grown more frantic. He leaves meals early, if he attends them at all. He avoids gathering places. He bristles at even casual inquiry. And, most tellingly, he has intensified his excursions to the 7th floor. His visits to that cursed stretch of blank wall are now daily, sometimes multiple times a day, each departure leaving him more unsteady than the last. The room of requirement is his chosen ground, and it is beginning to warp around him, drawn tight by his desperation, fractured by his inexperience, and strained by the complexity of whatever task the Dark Lord has imposed. I cannot see inside, of course. The castle guards its secrets when asked, but I can feel the distortion leaking outward. The magic in that corridor has changed texture. It quivers faintly beneath the torchlight, like air rising from heated stone, though the castle is frigid. Passing that wall now feels like brushing the edges of an enchantment in the midst of being built or broken. The castle does not approve. Hogwarts is alive in its way, and it reacts to misuse with subtle but unmistakable resistance. The torches burn more erratically there. The stones feel warmer or colder without discernible pattern. The air can grow so thin that even a breath feels like a trespass. Draco, in his ignorance, interprets these signs only as proof that the room resists him. He does not understand that it is also warning him, though in a language he cannot speak. I followed him, not visibly, but at a distance. On the first evening after the students returned, he moved through the corridor like a wraith, glancing over his shoulder at every set of approaching footsteps, nearly flinching when a portrait cleared its throat. When he reached the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy, he paused, checking each direction before pacing the length of the wall. 3 times, as required. On the third pass, the magic shifted, imperceptible to most glaringly obvious to me, and he vanished inside. The door closed behind him without a sound, leaving only stillness in its wake. I lingered, hoping for some clue, some residue of his intent. What I sensed was alarming. Traces of spellcraft unusually advanced for a child his age. Reconstructive magic, perhaps, interwoven with enchantments designed to synchronize 2 separate spaces. A feat few adult wizards would attempt, let alone attempt repeatedly. The room of requirement appears to be serving as a workshop, a laboratory, perhaps even a vault for something whose identity I have yet to confirm. It is beginning to resist him, but it is also bending, dangerously, unpredictably. He is succeeding just enough to doom himself. The Vow tightens each time I sense progress. Its magic pulses at irregular intervals, a heartbeat out of rhythm with my own. It is not pain, not yet, but neither is it a sensation one forgets. The bond recognizes that Draco edges closer to catastrophe. It also recognizes, coldly, efficiently, that my role will be invoked if he crosses a certain threshold. The reminder coils through me with increasing frequency, its grip more insistent in recent days. It is a containment spell as much as a contract, a leash that grows shorter with each passing week. Meanwhile, Potter has returned with renewed fixation. Vacation has not softened his obsession with Draco. If anything, it has sharpened it. He prowls corridors with a watchfulness he mistakes for subtlety, lurking at corners, lingering outside classrooms with poorly concealed suspicion. His friends attempt to restrain him, but Potter's impulses are notoriously immune to reason. I have caught him twice now, near the 7th floor, hiding behind excuses so flimsy they insult even his limited intelligence. He sees connections he cannot articulate. His instincts, clumsy but persistent, pull him toward Draco's secret, like a compass toward a magnetic field. He will have to be dealt with soon. Potter cannot be allowed to uncover the shape of the Dark Lord's plan. Not because the boy would understand it, but because he would run headlong into it and force confrontation before the timeline demands it. His arrogance grows in proportion to his success in potions. The cursed book he clings to continues to feed him techniques, shortcuts, and dark innovations he is incapable of comprehending. I do not know how much of my old work he has discovered, nor which annotations he has already bastardized through misuse. But I see its fingerprints in his spell work, in the sudden sharpness of his responses, in the dangerous gleam of misplaced confidence in his eyes. I must retrieve that book. The risk grows daily, but tonight the more pressing threat is Draco. He is approaching a threshold the Dark Lord surely intended, but did not expect him to reach so soon. His desperation accelerates him toward a goal he does not understand. He is a child playing at war, except he is not playing, and the war will permit no mistakes. I once believed pride would be his downfall. Now, I believe it will be haste. Dumbledore summoned me briefly this evening. His condition has worsened in the weeks since I last wrote. His voice thinner, his hand more corrupted, his magical aura faintly unsteady. Yet he speaks of Draco with the same measured restraint, the same infuriating insistence that interfering now would alter the necessary course. What course? What end? What vision guides him so confidently while the castle trembles beneath our feet? He reveals nothing. Not yet. Not ever enough. And still he expects my cooperation without question. The hour grows late outside my window. Snow has begun to fall in slow, deliberate spirals, as though wary of touching the ground. The wind carries faint, distant howls from the forbidden forest. The castle settles uneasily into its nighttime posture, the stone cooling beneath the draught that slips along the corridors like a living thing. Draco hides in a room that warps itself around his desperation. Potter shadows him with adolescent fury sharpened by stolen knowledge. Dumbledore weakens, bound to a plan only he understands. The Vow tightens. The castle senses the storm. And I, caught in the center, feel the walls inch closer with every passing hour. January 30th, 1997. A peculiar heaviness has settled over the school in these last days of January, as though the very air has thickened to a slow-moving substance that resists breath. The cold has deepened, sharp and metallic, making the castle's long corridors feel like the inside of a blade. Students hurry through them with red faces and stiff fingers, their cloaks drawn tight, their voices hushed by instinct rather than instruction. Winter at Hogwarts usually carries a muted sort of wonder. This winter carries dread. Even the paintings sense it. Their canvases feel taut, brittle, and their occupants move with the restless energy of creatures who anticipate collapse. Dumbledore summoned me earlier this evening, though he does so now with increasing rarity, not because he lacks need, but because his strength is failing. Each time he calls for me, I enter his office with the faint expectation that he will appear diminished beyond recognition. Each time he proves me correct in increments. The deterioration is not dramatic, it is insidious. A subtle faltering of breath, a tremor in the uninjured hand, a certain dimming of the extraordinary intensity behind his gaze. It is like watching the fading of a star, slow, measured, and irreversible. He sat behind his desk, not upright, but leaning slightly, as though the chair had begun to resist supporting his weight. The gloved hand remained hidden, but the curse has spread further up his arm. I can sense it now, even when I do not look directly at him. Dark magic of that nature carries a distinct resonance, a vibration beneath the skin, a hum that settles unpleasantly in the bones of anyone who knows how to detect it. His entire right arm feels hollowed and held together by sheer will. There is no potion capable of sealing such a wound, no healing charm that can reverse corruption wrought by magic of that magnitude. He refuses to speak its name. He refuses to provide details. He insists the situation is contained, a word that has lost all meaning in his mouth. But his restraint is deliberate. He is hedging truth as carefully as he directs the war around him, revealing only what he requires others to know in order to move them into position. I tell myself I understand. I tell myself I have accepted the silence. But each passing week makes that lie thinner. He asked for my observations on Draco. a conversational fiction. He already knows Draco is deteriorating. His questions, as always, were not true inquiries, but confirmations that my information aligns with his own. He listens with such calm that it borders on unnatural. No matter how dire the report, his eyes do not widen, his posture does not shift, and his voice does not tremble. The only time I have ever seen him flinch was years ago, not from pain, but from a memory. He has not flinched once this year, not even as death coils slowly around his arm. When I finished my analysis, he nodded, not with satisfaction, but with inevitability. He spoke of developments underway, a phrase that spills from his lips with frightening ease, as though he is reading from a script written long before either of us entered the room. He asked whether the castle felt different to me. The question, though deceptively simple, revealed more than any direct statement would have. Dumbledore feels the distortion too. He senses Draco's work. He knows that magic is being manipulated in a way that strains the castle's wards. I told him what I have observed, the thinness of the air in the 7th floor corridor, the irregular fluctuations in ambient enchantment, the faint echoes of spells cast and countered, as though Draco is pushing the room of requirement into contortions it was never meant to sustain. Dumbledore closed his eyes for a moment, a small gesture, but one that betrayed exhaustion. When he opened them again, the weariness had been buried beneath that maddening composure. He requested that I continue to monitor Draco, but avoid direct intervention. His tone, gentle, polite, held no space for refusal. "Not yet," he said, almost as an aside, as though the phrase were merely punctuation to the conversation. But the words have begun to take on a darker meaning. The longer he repeats them, the more they resemble a countdown rather than a reassurance. As if to underscore the point, he shifted the conversation abruptly to Slughorn. Apparently, the man is growing restless, spending too much time in old memories, too much time contemplating mistakes he refuses to name. Dumbledore's eyes sharpened when he mentioned him. There is something he needs from Slughorn, something specific, something that eludes capture. The thought unsettles him. He hides it well, but I have learned to distinguish his shades of calm. This one was brittle. He did not say the word Horcrux, not yet, but the contours of the truths are beginning to emerge. He showed Potter something, some memory, some fragment of the Dark Lord's past, and now he pursues more. As usual, he will not confide in me fully. He parcels out details with the patience of a man arranging chess pieces. He keeps the full shape of the war tucked behind his eyes, where no one else can reach. And yet he expects me to trust him implicitly, even as he reveals nothing. I should be accustomed to it by now. I am not. When our meeting concluded, he struggled briefly to rise. Only a second, barely a flicker, but enough to betray how far the curse has progressed. I pretended not to notice. He pretends not to falter. This is our arrangement, lies of omission performed mutually, to shield the fragility neither of us is allowed to name. Upon leaving his office, I stepped into the corridor and felt the castle shift beneath my feet. A subtle tremor in the magical currents. A sign that the room of requirement was sealing itself again, or reshaping according to Draco's demands. The torches flickered unnaturally, their flames bending sideways, as though pulled towards something unseen. The air thickened momentarily, so abruptly that my breath caught in my throat. It dissipated just as quickly, but the impression lingered. Something inside that room is nearing a threshold. I walked the 7th floor corridor. Again, on my return route, the tapestry swayed, though no wind stirred. The wall opposite remained blank, inscrutable. But the castle's silence there felt wrong, not expectant, strained. The kind of silence that precedes structural failure. Potter, of course, remains entangled in his own self-made theatrics. His suspicion regarding Draco has escalated. His accusations have grown more pointed, and his reliance on that damned book continues to infect his spell work with a confidence he has not earned. He has no idea how deeply he meddles in matters that could swallow him whole. He is no longer merely annoying. He is dangerous in his ignorance. Outside snow has begun again. Thick, heavy flakes drifting in patterns that obscure the grounds. The sky hangs low over the castle, smothering it in grey. Somewhere in these walls, a boy frantically reconstructs an object he barely understands. Somewhere else, a dying wizard arranges moves on a board no one else can see. And I, caught between them, feel the tightness of the vow and the tightening of fate. Winter deepens. The castle strains. Dumbledore weakens. The next fracture, I suspect, will not be a small one. February 15th, 1997. There are days when the castle seems to pulse with a kind of low, warning hum, a vibration so faint that most would dismiss it as imagination, or the shifting of ancient stone, or the winter wind pressing against the windows. Today, however, the hum sharpened into something unmistakable, a note of alarm, a dissonance running beneath the floorboards and echoing through the arches, like the resonance of a struck bell. I felt it before I knew the cause. I felt it when the mark stirred, when the air in the dungeons tightened, when a shiver of magic ran like a crack through the ambient wards. Minutes later, the castle erupted into noise. They carried Weasley Ronald, the younger one, into the hospital wing with an urgency bordering on panic. His face had the waxen pallor of someone caught between worlds, and his breathing was shallow, uneven, threaded with a strange, acrid scent that lingered in the air long after he was moved out of sight. Slughorn hovered beside him in a state of near collapse, babbling incoherently about a birthday gift, a bottle of mead, cursed contamination. He reeked of fear and guilt, a nauseating combination that clung to him like perfume spilt from a broken bottle. Students gathered outside the hospital wing in frantic clusters, their questions overlapping until they became a single mass of noise. The staff attempted to maintain control, though most of them were as shaken as the children. Minerva barked orders with clipped precision, her lips pressed into a thin white line. Flitwick looked as though someone had struck him with a stunning charm. Even Hagrid's booming voice faltered as he tried to shepherd students toward their dormitories. They behaved as though Weasley's collapse were a singular tragedy. In truth, it was merely the latest tremor in a series of increasingly violent disruptions. I did not need to examine the bottle to know who was responsible. Draco's signature, though crude and unrefined, is becoming unmistakable. Attempts at murder that rely on chance rather than precision. Plans that depend on intermediaries rather than strategy. He is flailing, desperate, reaching for any weapon within his grasp. And like a drowning man, he lashes out blindly, injuring not his intended target, but whoever happens to drift into the path of his panic. When I finally cornered Draco later in the evening, briefly, In the shadowed alcove outside Slughorn's classroom, he looked more corpse than boy. His skin was drawn so tight it emphasized every bone in his face, and his eyes flickered with a feverish brightness that revealed the depth of his unraveling. He attempted, predictably, to feign ignorance. His voice shook, his bravado shattered on the first syllable. He muttered something about Weasley being in the way. The lie tasted foul even in the air between us. But I could not interrogate him, not fully. The vow twisted just enough to remind me that Draco's survival, however tenuous, supersedes my desire for clarity. I cannot force him into a confession that would weaken him further. I cannot push him to the brink when he already stands one misstep from collapse. I must keep him alive. I must keep him functioning. I must keep him just whole, enough to reach the precipice the Dark Lord expects. And should he fall short, the vow coils with the certainty that I will be the one required to step forward. Weasley, meanwhile, remained suspended between life and death. The poison was not subtle. Nothing Draco crafts is subtle, but it was potent. Fortunately for the boy, Slughorn recognized enough of his own moral cowardice in the moment to act swiftly. Antidotes were administered, purging draughts forced down his throat, and the combined efforts of several capable witches and wizards have stabilized him. He will recover. This should comfort me, I suppose. It does not. I examined the remnants of the mead myself. The poison carried a faint, magical signature, residual traces of the same chaotic, unrefined energy I sensed in the cursed necklace. Draco's hand, unmistakably, he is growing more reckless. Each failure pushes him to greater extremes. Each mistake terrifies him further, and each terror drives him deeper into measures that will kill him long before they kill anyone else. The castle senses it. The wards near the 7th floor have grown agitated, like harp strings tightened to the point of snapping. The air near the room of requirement feels unstable, quivering with the residue of spells cast too quickly and too often. I walked that corridor tonight, long after curfew, when the castle sleeps lightly. The wall felt feverish to the touch, warm in some places, clammy in others, like stone attempting to breathe. The room is being forced into shapes it resists. Draco is breaking something or building something with equal possibility of disaster. Dumbledore summoned me briefly after the commotion from the hospital wing subsided. His condition has worsened noticeably. The curse crawls higher up his arm, though he conceals it beneath heavier fabric and a disarming smile. He questioned me about Draco. I provided what limited information I could without violating the web of obligations that now entrap me. As always, he listened with that maddening mixture of compassion and inevitability. His eyes, dimmed but still unbearably perceptive, held the quiet certainty of a man who sees the end of his path and has accepted it. He spoke, as he often does, of timing, of patience, of the necessity of letting events unfold in their proper order. He repeated that Draco must not be confronted, not by me, not yet, not yet. That phrase again, spoken softly, confidently, as though he alone has memorized the shape of the future. I am meant to trust this. I am meant to trust him. And yet, with every passing week, his body fails him further. His strength wanes. His vitality drains. Trust feels increasingly like a blade I am expected to hold by the edge. Potter, predictably, has made a spectacle of his own involvement. His belief that Draco is behind the incidents, has grown into something rabid. He pushes boundaries, questions authority, flings accusations with the abandon of someone who has never had to consider the consequences of being wrong. Worse, he still carries that damned book, the one with my handwriting, my youthful recklessness, my notes sharpened into weapons by a boy too ignorant to recognize the danger. His confidence in potions only amplifies his arrogance elsewhere. He thinks himself perceptive. He thinks himself adversarial. He thinks himself central to the story unfolding. He is not wrong, merely insufferable. After the chaos settled, I walked the castle alone. The torches had burned low, their flames casting long shadows that seemed to move independently of the objects that created them. The smell of antidotes still lingered faintly near the hospital wing. Crushed bezoar, myrtle essence, powdered stagweed, a medicinal cloud overlaying the darker scent of fear. The portraits muttered amongst themselves as I passed, some retreating into their frames, and all the while the castle hummed with the same uneasy vibration, the growing tension of converging lines. Draco is spiraling, Potter is circling, Dumbledore is fading. Another attempt has been made, another failure, another inch toward the inevitable. The noose tightens, the vow tightens, the year tightens, and the castle creaks under the strain of everything it senses coming. February 28th, 1997. There is a quality to late winter that feels less like a season and more like a slow suffocation. The cold no longer cuts. It presses, it settles onto the skin like damp wool, seeps into the lungs, and dulls every sound beneath a thick, muffling weight. The castle reflects this pressure with unnerving fidelity. Its corridors dim earlier, its staircases creak more solemnly, and its magic seems to lie beneath a heavier shroud. Tonight, that pressure feels particularly strong, as though the very stones strain under something only they can sense fully. Dumbledore summoned me again, and I went, though the appointments grow increasingly difficult to witness. He sat behind his desk, as he always does, but the posture was wrong. Not slumped, not quite. He is too proud, too deliberate for something so overt. But he leaned ever so slightly, as though the weight of his own arm threatened to drag him sideways. The cursed hand lay uncovered for once, and I saw the full extent of the corruption. The skin was blackened past the wrists now, the veins darkened, branching like roots feeding on dead earth. Even the air around it seemed colder. He tried to wave away my stare with characteristic dismissal. "Contained for now," he said, though the words rang as hollow as a cracked bell. "No part of this wound is contained. It spreads, slowly but inexorably, carving its way through tendon and muscle with the patience of a curse designed not to kill swiftly but to unravel a person in increments." He asked for potions again, specific ones this time. Strengthening drafts, stabilizers, pain sedatives disguised as restorative tonics. I know what he is doing, pacing himself, extending whatever time remains by fractionally slowing the advance. My bruise will grant him days, perhaps weeks. They will not grant him victory. He knows this. And yet he continues his quiet negotiations with mortality, dosing himself against the inevitable as though he can reason with a curse that cares nothing for his intent. What unnerves me most is the clarity in his eyes. He does not fear the outcome. He fears only the timing. We discuss Draco next. an exchange that felt as rehearsed as any I have had with him lately. He asked if the boy's condition had worsened. I confirmed that it had. He asked whether Draco had made progress. I told him I could sense as much from the distortions near the 7th floor corridor, though I cannot penetrate the room. He nodded unsurprised. His calm is infuriating. He speaks of Draco as if the boy's suffering is simply another variable in a long equation whose solution he already sees. Pressed him, again, about the necessity of allowing Draco's attempt to continue. You could intervene, I said. A word from you would end this charade. His expression softened, but did not waver. He said, not yet, with that maddening gentleness that feels more like stone than mercy. He claims Draco must face the full weight of his assignment before intervention becomes possible. He speaks of redemption, of potential, of moral crossroads, sentimental rubbish. Draco is not walking toward enlightenment. He is walking toward a grave, and I am bound to follow. When I examined the area outside the room of requirement earlier today, the air felt electrically thin, as though magic had been scraped from the surface of the stone. The torches flickered twice, not from draught, but from strain. Something inside is drawing on vast resources. The room is being forced open and closed in rapid succession, its protections manipulated without pause. If Draco continues on this path, he will either achieve his goal or tear himself apart. The vow pulses against my skin more frequently now. Not painful yet, but insistent. It feels as though the magic is paying attention, waiting, anticipating the moment when Draco's failure becomes irrevocable. The oath does not speak, but it does not need to. Its rhythm has grown steadier, tighter, more present. A warning, a countdown. Potter remains an unavoidable nuisance in this equation. His obsession with Draco has intensified, accelerated by his own misguided certainty, fueled by that cursed book of mine he still carries. His instincts about Draco are, unfortunately, not entirely misguided, but his conclusions are chaotic, wrong in every detail that matters, and dangerous in every way that could accelerate calamity. If he pushes Draco too aggressively, he may force the boy into a reckless attempt that triggers the very outcome I am bound to prevent. I cannot warn Potter. I cannot expose Draco. I cannot contradict Dumbledore. I cannot betray the Dark Lord. There is no position from which I can act without causing ruptures. Balance, then, temporary, fragile, unsustainable. After leaving Dumbledore's office, I paused outside the door longer than necessary, listening. No sound came from within. Not quill scratches, not shifting fabric, not even breath. The silence was absolute. It was the silence of someone mustering strength simply to remain upright. When I began descending the staircase, the castle shuddered faintly beneath my feet, not like an earthquake, but like a living creature flinching under a touch. A pulse of magic rippled through the upper floors. Draco was in the room again, working, struggling, pushing. The castle responded with a flicker of resistance that ran along the walls like a cold draft. Something is going to break. The castle Draco. The timeline Dumbledore clings to. The fragile illusion that I can navigate this narrowing corridor indefinitely. The evenings grow colder, the walls grow more brittle, and Dumbledore's arm grows darker. There is a point at which pressure becomes rupture. I fear that point is no longer months away, but day. March 16th, 1997. The castle seemed caught between seasons. Outside, Winter clings stubbornly to the grounds in hardened patches of frost, but inside, the corridors have begun to warm with a restless, volatile energy that has nothing to do with spring. Students murmur of exams, Quidditch, and slughorns in insipid gatherings. But beneath their mundane concerns lies a rising tension, thin, sharp, and pervasive. Conflict is gathering like storm clouds, invisible yet undeniable. And at the center of it stands Potter, whose fixation on Draco has swollen into something bordering on mania. In class today, he watched Draco more than he watched his wand. It was not the idle rivalry of past years, but the predatory alertness of someone hunting a pattern. Potter's eyes follow Draco's every movement. When he enters a room, when he leaves, when he lingers too long in the corridor. The boy's instincts, always blunted by impulse, now burn bright enough to be almost painful to witness. He is wrong in execution, but not entirely wrong in suspicion. He knows Draco is unraveling. He knows something dangerous is unfolding. But he does not know the shape of it, nor the weight of it, nor the lethal consequences of pushing too hard. This morning he cornered Draco outside the Great Hall, an act as reckless as it was inevitable. Their confrontation lasted mere seconds, too brief to draw the attention of professors, but long enough for Draco's mask to crack. I saw the fear in his expression even from across the hall, a quick flare of panic, followed by the brittle arrogance he clings to like armor. Potter pressed him with accusations, voice low, posture rigid, his friends tugging at his sleeves. Draco shoved past him with the last remnants of his dignity. Potter stood there trembling, not with fear, but with conviction. Later, Potter came to class late, breathing hard, robes askew. He claimed he had lost track of time, a transparent lie. He is watching Draco with relentless vigilance, and the strange shows. The boy's temper is shorter, his responses sharper. He oscillates between sullen detachment and sudden bursts of aggression. And through all of it, that cursed book, the half-blood scrap of my past, feeds him techniques he does not understand. His spell work has improved to a degree that should alarm anyone paying attention. His shield charms, for instance, have acquired a crisp edge that mirrors methods I once developed to counter more advanced curses. He casts them without hesitation, without comprehension, without caution. If he continues along this path, the book will lead him towards something catastrophic. Sectumsempra lies buried among those pages, a spell I created when I was young enough to believe innovation excused cruelty. I abandoned it for a reason. It is meant for lethal force, not adolescent quarrels. If Potter stumbles across it, and he will, if he has not already, he will wield it without understanding its consequences. The thought leaves a taste in my mouth akin to iron. Draco, meanwhile, has grown so gaunt he resembles a shadow wearing the outline of a boy. He flinches at every sound. His hands tremble when he thinks no one is looking, and the frequency of his visits to the room of requirement has increased to a near obsessive degree. I walked the 7th floor corridor again last night. The air outside the room crackled faintly, as though overcharged. The torches flickered, dimmed, then flared as I passed, as if they struggled to compensate for the magical draw from behind the wall. Draco's attempts are becoming more aggressive and more dangerous. He is close now, too close. But proximity to success does not calm him. It terrifies him. He has realized, perhaps for the first time, that achievement will not save him. If he succeeds, the Dark Lord will reward him with expectations he cannot possibly meet. If he fails, he will die. Neither path offers escape. Potter's pursuit only hastens Draco's collapse. I confronted Draco earlier in the day, though confrontation is a term far too generous for the stunted exchange that occurred. He was leaving the potions classroom, pale, distracted, moving at a near stumble. I stepped into his path. He startled so violently that his wand slipped from his sleeve and clattered to the floor. His face drained of what little color remained. I asked where he had been that morning during 2 missed classes. He muttered something about the hospital wing, an excuse so poorly constructed it would not fool a first year. I pressed only lightly. The vow constrains me more tightly each week. The magic at my wrist thrummed faintly, a warning, a reminder. Draco snapped, retreating into the brittle fury of someone who has forgotten what it feels like to speak honestly. He spat some half-formed insult and fled. I let him go. To push him harder would only hasten the inevitable. And timing, not action, is the element Dumbledore guards with fanatical insistence. Speaking of Dumbledore, his decline accelerates. When I saw him 2 nights ago, he seemed older by months. The curse creeps upward, devouring tissue and magic alike, its hunger insatiable. I offered another round of potions. He accepted them with the soft gratitude of someone indulging comfort rather than seeking cure. His voice, when he spoke of Draco, carried a weight I had not heard before. Not sorrow, not fear, but something closer to resolve. Something final. He still insists on patience. He still insists Draco must walk the path to its endpoint. He still insists that my role will be required, but only when the moment is right, as though moments obey intention, as though timing is something that can be shaped like clay. Potter, Draco, Dumbledore, the 3 of them circle one another like moths around darkened flame. And I stand somewhere between them, bound by a vow that has begun to feel like a chain dragged behind my ribs. The year is accelerating. Pressure builds in every hallway, every night sky, every empty corner where shadows stretch too far. Potter is watching for catastrophes. Draco is stepping toward one, and I can feel, not in my mind but in my bones, that the next rupture is coming soon. March 30th, 1997. There are moments when the castle seems to recoil, as though the ancient stones themselves sense that something profane has occurred within their walls. This afternoon produced one such moment. The air in the corridors tightened. The torches sputtered in sudden fury, and a faint metallic scent drifted upward into the passages like steam rising from a struck cauldron. Even before I knew the cause, before I saw the trail of panicked students rushing from the direction of the boys' lavatory, I felt it. A signature of magic I had not sensed in years. Razor-edged, unforgiving. A curse that cuts deeper than flesh. Sectumsempra, my invention, my mistake. I reached the bathroom to the sight of Draco collapsed on the floor, his body slick with blood. The tiles streaked with it in long, violent arcs. His shirt was shredded deep, gashes carved through skin and muscle as though invisible blades had struck him again and again. The smell of blood was thick, fresh, iron-rich, mingled with the sharp sting of ruptured magic. For a heartbeat I could not move. It felt like encountering a ghost from my own past, one I had hoped would never escape the confines of ink and parchment. Potter stood over him, pallid with shock, wand still raised. His mouth hung open in stunned incomprehension, as though the consequences of his spell had only just occurred to him. that he would dare use a curse he did not understand, that he found in a book not meant for his hands, was almost enough to overwhelm my composure. Almost. I shoved him aside and knelt beside Draco. The boy's breathing was shallow, irregular, each inhale wet and strained. Sectumsempra is not a spell that wounds, it butchers. Had I arrived seconds later, the outcome would have been irreversible. I cast the counter-curse with the precision of someone who has rehearsed it in solitude far too many times. Someone who crafted the wound and the remedy in the same fevered season of youth. Flesh knit, blood flow slowed, the worst of the damage sealed, though not without leaving scars that will never fully fade. Draco regained consciousness only long enough to moan softly before slipping into unconsciousness. His face, already gaunt from weeks of strain, looked almost waxen in that moment. What little strength he possessed has been stolen by fear, exhaustion, and now this humiliation. This near death, delivered not by the Dark Lord's enemies, but by Potter's reckless arrogance. I turned on Potter then, and he cowered, an expression I have rarely seen on him. He tried to speak, tried to explain. I didn't know, I didn't mean. His excuses twisted in the air like smoke. I felt a flash of fury sharp enough to burn, not because he injured Draco, though that alone carries weight, not because he wielded power he had no right to touch, but because he had used my spell, something I created in a moment of youthful darkness, against a boy who is already caught in a noose he cannot escape. He refused to tell me where he learned the curse. He lied badly, eyes darting, voice thin. He clung to the book even as he denied it. I could see the truth written across his face, as if he could hide something from me when that something was carved from my own hand. I confiscated his remaining books and ordered him to bring me the rest, fully aware he would not comply completely. The Half-Blood Prince's notebook remains hidden somewhere in the castle, crammed with spells, counter-curses, improvements, and innovations I once believed. Brilliant, dangerous things, reckless things. And Potter has been using them with blind faith. The irony is grotesque. Draco has been transported to the hospital wing. Poppy stabilized him quickly, though the wounds taxed even her formidable skill. She asked questions I did not answer. I did not tell her the nature of the curse. I did not tell her who invented it. I merely stood there, watching Draco breathe, each breath a reminder of how close he came to being freed, violently, from the impossible task set before him. And now the vow coils again, its magic thrumming in faint agitation. Draco lives, barely, but he lives. The spell nearly forced my hand long before the timeline allows. Potter's impulse may have altered nothing externally, but internally the path has narrowed. Draco will be more paranoid than ever, more reckless. He will return to the cabinet with renewed frenzy, driven by the humiliation of weakness and the certainty that time is running out. As for Potter, his guilt will warp quickly into resentment. Already I saw the spark of it as he left my office after detention was assigned. He does not understand the gravity of what he has done. He never does. His entire life has unfolded as a series of accidents shaped into legends. Now he stumbles into darker shadows, guided by a book he could not begin to comprehend. Dumbledore summoned me briefly this evening. I told him what he needed to know. Draco will survive. Potter used a curse he should never have known. The headmaster's face tightened, though his voice remained calm. His eyes lingered on me longer than usual, and I wondered, just for an instant, if he recognized the spell's origin. He said nothing, and I did not ask. Tonight, the castle is deathly quiet. The torches burn low, the air heavy with the metallic residue of spilled blood. Snow presses against the window panes like a pale shroud. Something in the rhythm of the year has shifted. A boundary has been crossed. Draco is wounded. Potter is dangerous. And I, creator of the very blade Potter wielded, feel the consequences closing in like tightening wire. April 10th, 1997. The dark mark burned last night, not with the full, searing summons of a gathering, but with a concentrated, needling sting that radiated along the nerves like electricity trapped beneath the skin. A signal, not a command. A reminder that the Dark Lord's gaze has turned inward toward his circle, weighing loyalties, testing weaknesses. The sensation lingered long after the initial spike faded, humming in my bones like the aftershock of a distant explosion. I knew what it presaged before the owl arrived at my window. A summons in all but name. Tonight I answered it. He did not require my presence in full assembly. No revel, no coldly orchestrated cruelty, no demonstration of power to cow the less usefuls. Instead, he spoke to me alone, in a narrow chamber whose walls bore remnants of countless enchantments layered upon one another like sedimentary stone. Magic hung thick in the air, heavy enough to choke on, as though the room itself had absorbed centuries of whispered torments and half-finished spells. The shadows along the corners sharpened each time he moved, bending toward him as though drawn by gravity. He questioned me, softly at first, so softly it might have passed for casual conversation to someone unfamiliar with him. He asked about Hogwarts, about the temper of the staff, about the students' attitudes, about Dumbledore's waning influence. His voice held no inflection. It never does when he is most dangerous. There is a stillness in him that masquerades as calm, but is, in truth, the coiled restraint of a serpent deciding whether the creature before it is prey or amusement. I answered with the same careful balance I have spent years perfecting. Enough truth to maintain his regard, enough distance to protect the vulnerable details, enough strategic phrasing to guide his conclusions toward what he already wishes to believe. I described the staff as restless, the students as fearful, the castle as strained beneath mounting tensions. All true. I let him draw his own meaning from the fragments, but then he shifted. He asked about Draco. Not explicitly, not immediately. He circled the subject, the way a predator circles an injured target, testing, anticipating. He mentioned the failures at Hogwarts, the necklace, the poisoned mead. His tone never changed, but the air in the chamber tightened, and the shadows along the floor lengthened, as though reacting to an unseen wind. He observed, too casually, that Draco had not yet proven himself. Then he asked what I had observed in the boy. A trap, a test, and beneath it something colder. The Dark Lord's growing suspicion that Draco may not succeed. If I praised Draco too highly, I risked revealing my investment. If I condemned him, I risked hastening his death. I chose the narrow path between. I said Draco was determined, driven, resourceful, but inexperienced. I emphasized that the Headmaster's vigilance complicates matters. I offered nothing that could be construed as disloyalty, Nothing that suggested I doubted Voldemort's wisdom in choosing Draco, but also nothing that implied the boy was on the verge of triumph. The Dark Lord watched me with that terrible patience of his eyes, slits of red within a face that hardly qualifies as human, searched mine as though sifting through them for impurities. There is no occlumency strong enough to fully shield one from him, but one can redirect, obscure, deflect. I do not know if he found what he was looking for. He let the subject drop with a dismissive gesture, the way one discards a candle that has burned too low to be useful. Next he asked about Dumbledore. This was the more perilous inquiry. He does not know about the curse, not in its true form, but he suspects weakness. He suspects decline. He suspects opportunity. I reported carefully that Dumbledore appears increasingly frail, though he remains magically formidable. A delicate balance of truth and caution. If he believes Dumbledore too weak, he may act prematurely. If he believes him invulnerable, he will punish Draco for failing to fell the invincible Headmaster. Again that awful silence. Again that contemplative stare. I do not know which answer he sought, only that he wanted more than I could give. When he dismissed me, it was with a flick of his fingers, a gesture that ordinarily means nothing. But the mark burned again as I left, a sharper burn, a warning burn. Something shifts in him, something dark, even by his standard. Returning to Hogwarts felt like crossing a threshold between two collapsing worlds. The castle greeted me with a shudder, subtle but unmistakable. The torches along the main staircase bent their flames inward as I passed, as though bowing or recoiling. It is difficult to tell which. Draco was not in the Slytherin common room when I checked. He is doubtless in the room of requirement again, pushing himself past exhaustion. If the Dark Lord has grown suspicious, Draco will sense it in his bones. Fear has a way of sharpening instinct, and fear now drives him more thoroughly than ambition ever did. Dumbledore, when I reported back, accepted my account with infuriating calm. His face was pale, his hand trembling slightly beneath his sleeve. He did not speak the words I dreaded, but his eyes told me he already knows the Dark Lord's suspicions are mounting. The timeline shortens. Tonight, the castle is colder than it should be. The mark still aches, and the path ahead narrows by the hour. I am being pressed from both sides. Soon something will break. April 25th, 1997. The air in Dumbledore's office has changed. It used to carry the faint scent of lemon drops and parchment, undercut with the warm hum of his peculiar, ageless magic. The kind of quiet radiance that lingered in the corners like morning light. Now the room feels colder, dimmer. The artifacts still flicker and pulse, but many of them do so with a strained irregularity, as though they draw breath with effort. Even Fawkes seemed subdued, feathers dimmed, head bowed as if listening to some sorrow only phoenixes can perceive. Dumbledore asked for me tonight, and though he does so infrequently as his strength wanes, these rare summonses have grown heavier in implications. I entered expecting another vague inquiry about Draco, another evasive reassurance about the curse that devours him. Instead, I found him seated before the pensieve, the surface swirling with a muted glow that cast shadows like ripples across his worn features. He looked older than I have ever seen him, older than any wizard I've ever known, not merely aged but burdened, hollowed by something far deeper than physical deterioration. He did not waste time with pleasantries. "The memory from Slughorn," he said, voice thin but steady. "Harry has obtained it." For a moment, neither of us spoke. I felt the shape of what that must mean, though I did not yet grasp the full contour of it. Dumbledore's eyes, pale, fierce, dimmed yet still unbearably perceptive, held mine with a quiet gravity. "He knows," Dumbledore continued. "Or rather, he knows enough to understand what Tom once sought." Still, he did not say the word Horcrux, but the eddies of the truth tightened around us like a snare. I felt it, the unmistakable finality of a secret crossing the threshold between silence and necessity. He finally revealed the nature of the ring. Not fully, not with the surgical detail he so often withholds, but enough to confirm what I had long suspected but never dared articulate. The curse was born of an object saturated with dark magic. Magic so deeply embedded it has become a spiritual infection. Something crafted through murder, multiple murder. The explanation unfurled with sickening inevitability. He explained that the curse was not merely damaging, it was terminal. Even my counterspells, my potions, my frantic work at stabilizing the wound had only bought him time. A year, perhaps less. He said this without fear, without regret, as though he were informing me of a scheduled appointment rather than his own approaching death. My anger was instantaneous, though invisible. He should have told me. He should have told someone to hide a mortal curse while orchestrating the movements of an entire war. His recklessness beyond comprehension. But Dumbledore does not concern himself with self-preservation. His gaze remains fixed on the horizon, on set points in the distance, even as the ground beneath him crumbles. He spoke next of Harry, of how the boy must be prepared, of what the boy must eventually do. I listened with growing disquiet as he detailed fragments of Voldemort's past. Memories woven together to form a pattern so hideous it nearly defies articulation. Murder, split, soul divided. A path toward immortality forged through desecration. Potter knows pieces of this now, and Dumbledore intends for him to know the rest. My role, of course, remains painfully clear. I am to prepare the boy for the final stages, though indirectly. Even now, Dumbledore shapes the boy's understanding like a sculptor chiseling stone, and he expects me to shape the aftermath. He shifted then, in the way he does when crossing from the realm of theory into the realm of inevitability. "Severus," he said quietly, "there will come a time when I cannot act, when a choice must be made." His voice thinned, his breath hitched, and though he steadied himself quickly, I saw the truth as plainly as the blackened veins beneath his sleeve. P is dying, and he intends for me to assist that end. He did not ask directly, not tonight. He did not need to. The question hung between us like a drawn blade, suspended, waiting. I felt a coldness spread through me, not fear, not revulsion, but something heavier, a sinking awareness of what he expects, what the vow may demand, what the war will require. He trusts me. That trust is a burden I cannot refuse, though it tastes like poison. He believes in the necessity of sacrifice, his own above all, and he believes I am the one who must ensure its fulfillment. When I left his office, the corridor outside felt unbearably still. The castle's magic pressed close, thin and strained, as though listening. The torches flickered once, their flames bending toward the closed door behind me, as if acknowledging the weight of the conversation heard by no one but the walls. Dumbledore knows the shape of his end. Potter approaches the edge of revelations he is not ready to comprehend. Draco races toward a breaking point, and I, tethered by vow, by circumstance, by a lifetime of choices that cannot be undone, stand poised at the brink of a role I never sought yet cannot refuse. Tonight the air tastes of endings, and the year has begun its descent. May 9th, 1997. The castle is no longer merely strained, it is beginning to warp. Hogwarts has always possessed a peculiar elasticity. Its walls shift, its staircases rotate, its magic adapts to meet the emotions of its occupants. But this is different. Something in the atmosphere has tightened like a wire pulled too far, vibrating at a pitch only those attuned to the deeper currents of magic can detect. Even the stone seems to vibrate faintly beneath the palm if one pauses long enough to listen. Draco is responsible for this tension, though not in the way he imagines. His work inside the room of requirement has reached a fevered intensity, and the castle responds like a creature forced into unnatural contortions. He visits the room daily now, sometimes disappearing for hours. Each time he emerges, his face appears more hollowed, his eyes more bloodshot, his posture more unsteady. The boy is fraying, thread by thread, unraveling before the school's oblivious eyes. I walked the 7th floor corridor tonight under the pretense of patrol. The precautions are unnecessary. Filch does not question my movements, but old habits endure. When I passed the tapestry of Barnabas, the balmy, the air felt charged, as though lightning had struck somewhere deep within the castle. The wall opposite buzzed with residual magic so volatile it prickled along my fingertips. Draco has been forcing the room into ever more complex configurations. Whatever he is attempting, whatever he is repairing, has progressed. I still cannot see the vanishing cabinet, of course. I only know its existence through inference, the nature of the distortions, the repeated magical signatures, the faint reek of old enchantments being forcibly reactivated. Draco's attempts leave behind an echo, a kind of jagged aftertaste in the magic that I remember all too well from my own youth. Reconstructive spellwork of this scale is not only beyond his training, it is beyond his temperament. And yet he persists, feverishly, desperately, blindly. The dark mark has begun to react in subtle ways, not burning, not even pulsing, but sparking with faint, sharp tremors as though responding to a distant call that has not yet fully formed. The Dark Lord prepares for something. Whether he senses Draco's nearing completion or doubts it, I cannot say. But the mark tingles at odd intervals, and each time it does, I feel the vow stir like a second heartbeat beneath the skin. The vow grows louder. It pulls more insistently each day, tightening like a leech. It does not offer warnings, it offers inevitability. It knows Draco's proximity to failure, just as it senses his proximity to success. The magic cares nothing for nuance. It cares only for the fulfillment of its conditions. If Draco dies, I die. If he fails, I must finish the task. A binary that leaves no space for hesitation, no margin for error. The boy is running out of time. The castle feels it, the mark feels it, and Dumbledore feels it most of all. I visited his office earlier this evening. He looked even weaker than he did the week before. Eyes sunken, skin thin and translucent, magic dimmed to a faint shimmer around him. The curse has wrapped its tendrils farther up his arm, spreading toward the shoulder. He hides it beneath heavier robes now, though the fabric cannot conceal the toll. When he lifted a cup of tea, his fingers trembled. He steadied them quickly, perhaps out of pride, perhaps out of habit. But the tremor lingered. He asked whether Draco was close. I answered honestly, yes. Not in understanding the consequences, not in readiness for the aftermath, but close to succeeding in whatever task he has been given. Dumbledore nodded, as if confirming a calculation already completed. His calmness is the most disturbing aspect of all this. There is no fear in him, no hesitation, only acceptance. The sort that comes from a man who has already crossed the threshold of his fate and now waits for the world to catch up. He spoke briefly of Potter. The boy grows restless. His suspicions have sharpened to dangerous points, though he continues to misinterpret the pattern. He watches Draco obsessively, and Draco knows it. Their antagonism has entered a new, more volatile phase, one in which fear fuels every interaction. If Potter were to confront Draco again at the wrong moment, the results could easily trigger a catastrophe. Pooh. I told Dumbledore as much. He merely closed his eyes, murmured something about paths converging, and shifted the conversation to the memory Potter recovered from Slughorn, as though the fate of a desperate boy and a cursed headmaster could be reduced to intersecting lines on a map only he can read. Sometimes I wonder whether he sees the world as something static, a sequence of events predetermined in some quiet realm beyond comprehension. If so, he is a man walking willingly toward the end of a script he cannot alter. That thought chills me more than the curse itself. Tonight the castle is restless. The portraits mutter behind their frames. The torches flare and dim as though struggling to maintain equilibrium. Even the suits of armor seem to lean forward in their alcoves, listening. A storm gathers, not in the sky, but in the walls, in the air, in the magic itself. Draco is nearly finished. The Dark Lord prepares, Dumbledore declines, and I feel the noose tightening, drawn by forces on both sides, leaving me suspended in a narrowing corridor of obligations. The next breach in the year will not be small, and when it comes, there will be no turning away. May 24th, 1997. There are requests that arrive not as questions, but as verdicts. Tonight, Dumbledore delivered one. He summoned me after sunset, when the last of the students had retreated to their dormitories, and the corridors carried only the thin echoes of distant footsteps. The castle was in one of its heavy silences, the kind that settles over the stones like ash. Even the torches burned lower, their flames shivering as though uneasy about illuminating what was to follow. When I entered his office, the first thing I noticed was that he had dismissed his wand to the far side of the desk. A rare gesture, symbolic in the way all his small acts tend to be. He sat upright, but with visible effort, the cursed arm hidden beneath the folds of his robes, though nothing could hide the truth anymore. The decay has accelerated. The magic clings to him like frostbite, its rot creeping further along muscle and bone. He is dying, and he knows it. And he called me here to force that truth into final shape. He did not speak immediately. For a moment, he simply observed me with that quiet, evaluating gaze that once felt irritating and now feels intolerably heavy. Beneath the pallor and exhaustion, there was something new in his expression, something resolute, sharpened to a point. Whatever restraint remained in him had evaporated. He had made a decision. "Severus," he said at last, and the weight in his voice settled like a stone. "It is time." I knew before, he continued, had known for months, in the way one knows a storm will break before the first drop of rain. But hearing it aloud still struck with the force of a blow. He told me the curse would kill him soon, more quickly now than he had anticipated. That his remaining strength had become a dwindling resource, spent largely on preparing Potter for what lay beyond the edge of this school year. That Voldemort must not be allowed the satisfaction of killing him. That Draco must not be the instrument of his death. That the Dark Lord's plan must proceed in a way that preserves the fragile scaffolding of trust I've spent years constructing. And then, with calm that bordered on the obscene, he asked me to be the one to end his life. The words were spoken gently, with no tremor, no hesitation, as though he were asking me to fetch a book from a shelf or administer a routine potion. Only his eyes betrayed the enormity of the request, a flicker of deep sorrow, or perhaps apology, emotions he rarely allows to surface. He masked them quickly, but the moment was there. He said it was mercy, that his death would be imminent regardless, and far more agonizing if left to the curse. That Draco's soul must not be destroyed by the act, that mine is already compromised enough to carry it. I felt the world narrow to a cold, focused point. The vow tightened around my wrist, reminding me with cruel precision that refusal is not merely impossible, it is forbidden. If Draco attempts the kill and fails, the vow will tear through me and force my compliance. Better to act by choice than by the magic's compulsion. Still, choice is too generous a term. I accepted. I did not allow emotion into my voice. Emotion has no place here. I gave him the assent he required and held his gaze without flinching, because he expects that of me, because anything less would dishonor the gravity of the task, because I could not permit him to see the fracture opening beneath the surface of my composure. He thanked me, quietly, sincerely, as though gratitude were appropriate for what he had just demanded. He believes this act will serve the war. That Voldemort will trust me completely once I have killed the only wizard he ever feared. That the Order will not understand, and must not understand, but that Potter eventually will. I did not ask for faith in return. I did not want it. When the conversation ended, he dismissed me with his usual soft tone, though the timbre was thinner than ever. I turned to leave, but paused at the door, an involuntary hesitation. I sensed, with an intuition I cannot explain, that this would be the last time we spoke without the shadow of the final act hanging between us, open. Dumbledore looked toward the window. The moonlight washed over his face, outlining the stark hollows carved by the curse and the year's strain. He appeared, if only for a moment, not as the greatest wizard of our age, but as an old man nearing the edge of his strength. A man prepared to die for reasons only he fully comprehends. Outside his office, the night air struck like ice. The corridors were empty, the stillness absolute. The castle's magic thrummed faintly underfoot, a soft vibration that seemed to harmonize with the mark beneath my sleeve and the vow along my arm. 3 bindings, 3 masters, 3 fates converging. Draco will soon complete his task. The Dark Lord waits for the breach. The castle anticipates catastrophe, and I, the chosen executioner, walk a path that narrows with every breath. There is no turning back now. Dumbledore has sealed his fate, and in doing so, he has sealed mine. June 15th, 1997. The castle feels hollow tonight. Hollow in the way a body feels after too much blood has been drawn. The corridors echo strangely. Every footstep sounds doubled, distorted, as though the stones themselves are repeating each sound in a lower register. The torches burn weakly, their flames thin and pale, unable or unwilling to commit fully to the task of illumination. It is the stillness before a violent shift, the kind of quiet that draws breath in anticipation and does not exhale. Dumbledore is preparing to leave Hogwarts tomorrow. I sensed it before he confirmed it. Something in the air around the castle has changed. An absence, a thinning, as though a stabilizing presence is diminishing. The wards feel brittle, stretched thin along the battlements. Even the sky outside has adopted a muted, bruised color, as if imitating the atmosphere within the castle walls. He summoned me this afternoon, though he hardly needed to. I could have found him from the residue of magic that trails behind him like a fading comet. His office felt smaller than usual when I arrived. The artifacts that once hummed warmly now sputtered with intermittent surges, their light flickering like dying embers. Fawkes watched from his perch with uncharacteristic stillness, wings drawn tight against his body. Dumbledore did not look up immediately when I entered. He was studying a set of maps, inked timelines, locations, patterns drawn in loops that intersected and coiled. I recognized none of the specifics, but the shape of it was unmistakable. Planning for something Potter must face beyond these walls. When he finally met my eyes, the weight of what he intended settled between us. He informed me, in that maddeningly serene tone, that he was taking Potter away from the castle, that they would be gone for some time, that they had business to attend to. Another cryptic fragment in the mosaic he insists on assembling in total silence. His hand, what remains of it, trembled when he placed the maps aside. The curse has consumed so much of him that whatever vitality he once possessed now flickers only intermittently. He does not have much time left. He knows it. I know it. The castle knows it. I asked him if his departure was wise. He smiled faintly, with the weary gentleness of someone who has already crossed beyond the point where wisdom matters. "We have reached the part of the path," he said, "where choice is narrow." His language grows increasingly fatalistic, increasingly final. I told him what I have sensed from Draco, how the boy grows more frantic, how the room of requirement pulses with distorted magic, how the cabinet is likely close to completion. Dumbledore listened with a stillness that bordered on unnatural. His acceptance of his fate has become almost unbearable to witness. When I pressed him carefully about the plan we agreed upon weeks ago, his gaze sharpened, though his voice remained soft. "Severus," he said, "you must not hesitate." Massify required the reminder, as if the vow itself does not thrum against my arm each time Draco falters, as if the knowledge of what I must do has not shadowed every waking moment. Hesitation is no longer an option. It is a luxury I forfeited long before this year began. After our meeting, I lingered briefly in the office, taking in the room with an unease I could not dispel. The silver instruments fizzed weakly, lights dimming. Portraits watched with the strained silence of an audience anticipating the fall of a curtain. Even the air smelled faintly of ozone, as though charged with static. When I left, I stood for a long moment outside his door. It occurred to me, quietly, almost clinically, that this may be the last time I see him alive while he is still himself. Tomorrow he leaves the school to chase some final fragment of Voldemort's past. And when he returns, the end of his story will descend upon us. Later in the evening, as I walked the corridors, I sensed something else. Movement within Draco. Urgency, brittle and volatile. He is close now. The magical signature around the 7th floor corridor is near breaking point. The castle trembles slightly when he enters the room. It is a near imperceptible vibration, but unmistakable to one who has spent decades studying the subtleties of enchantment. Potter, unsurprisingly, has noticed something. He watches Draco with the obsessive vigilance of a cornered animal. He blunders after him through corridors, driven by fear, anger, and the half-formed belief that he alone detects the approaching catastrophe. He does not understand the magnitude of what he senses, but he senses it nonetheless. Tonight, the dark mark tingled, not a summons, not a burn, but a flicker, a pulse, a sign of preparations underway. Voldemort waits. Draco races toward the task, and Dumbledore prepares to step willingly into the final act of his life. The castle has reached a point of absolute tension, a bowstring drawn to full extension. Tomorrow, the Headmaster will leave. Tomorrow, Potter will follow. And when they return, if they return, the year will fracture beyond repair. Even the air feels tight, sharp, expectant. Something is about to break. I can feel it in the stone. I can feel it in the mark. I can feel it in myself. June 16th, 1997. The night has teeth. It began with a shift so subtle I nearly dismissed it. A faint flicker in the wards. A tremor beneath the soles of my boots as I walked the corridor outside the staff room. Then the dark mark ignited in a sudden, violent burn, searing upward along the veins like molten iron. It was not a summons in the usual sense. It was a signal, a breach. Draco had done it. The castle sensed it instantly. A surge of distorted magic rippled through the upper floors, rattling portraits in their frames and extinguishing several torches at once. The air thickened, pressing inward from all sides like a collapsing lung. Somewhere deep within the walls, the vanishing cabinet responded with a resonance that carried through the stone, an answering vibration, ancient and wrong, as though two spaces were being forcibly stitched together. Within moments, the school erupted. Cries echoed from distant hallways. Spells cracked through the upper levels like lightning snapping through storm clouds. The wards shuddered again, this time not faintly, but with violent recoil. A breach of this nature should be impossible, and yet the magic bending around the cabinet's twin was unmistakable. The Death Eaters were entering the castle. I did not run. Running would have been a mistake. Too conspicuous, too eager. Instead, I walked with the measured pace of someone responding to a crisis with authority, moving through pockets of panicked students and stunned portraits. My heart kept a steady rhythm, though the mark continued to pulse with dark insistence beneath my sleeve. Every step felt like descending a staircase already ablaze. As I reached the 7th floor corridor, I sensed, rather than saw, the first signs of battle. 2 suits of armor had collapsed, knocked aside by curses powerful enough to dent the enchanted metal. A tapestry lay on the floor, smoldering at the edges. The air carried the sharp sting of dark enchantment, mixed with the sulphurous aftertaste of hastily cast defensive spells. The Death Eaters were here, and Draco, somewhere ahead, was leading them. Then I felt it. Dumbledore's magic flicker. Not extinguished, just altered, faded, untethered from the castle's wards in that unmistakable way that signals departure. He was gone, not dead, not yet, but gone from Hogwarts. He had returned. Potter, though I could not see him, must have returned with him. The clarity of their magic carried a distinctive signature. Light and shadow brushing through the ward lines, like twin notes, struck simultaneously. And then, just as quickly, Dumbledore's magic dimmed again, not from departure, but exhaustion. A sickening drop, a collapse. The Astronomy Tower called out like a beacon. I turned toward it immediately, not out of urgency, out of inevitability. The night had finally aligned every piece of the trap. Draco had succeeded. Death Eaters roamed the castle. Dumbledore had been weakened by whatever idiocy he and Potter had undertaken, and the Marksburn felt like a leash dragging me upward, step by step. In the great hall, chaos erupted. Students fled as curses shattered the windows and sent benches flying. The carrows moved along the aisles like carrion birds. I passed through without pausing, deflecting a stray hex with a flick of my wand. A masked figure made the foolish mistake of trying to greet me. Bellatrix, of course, but I pushed past her with a snarl. She laughed, exhilarated by the carnage. She has always found joy where others find horror. I took a side stairway to avoid a congested hallway and emerged onto the upper levels. The torches here were dead, suffocated by the crushing density of dark magic. Shadows writhed along the stone as curses from below flickered upward in brief arcs of light. Then I heard footsteps below, hurried, uneven, the kind born of panic rather than purpose. The castle carried the echo upward, but the identity of the source remained obscured beneath the chaos. I forced myself upward with deliberate calm. My steps were measured, my breathing steady. The vow pulsed beneath my skin, its magic tightening with every foot I climbed, as though anticipating the moment it had been crafted for. When I reached the landing outside the tower, I paused. The air here was colder, thinner, as if stripped of all vitality. The door was open, just slightly, allowing a sliver of moonlight to spill into the corridor. Voices murmured beyond it, Draco's sharp with fear, Dumbledore's weak, nearly threadbare. I stepped through. The scene unfolded in an instant. Draco's wand, trembling, his face contorted with misery. Dumbledore standing, or trying to, against the battlements, weakened to the point of collapse. The Death Eaters behind Draco were restless, urging, taunting. Bellatrix vibrated with glee. And Potter, though hidden beneath his idiotic cloak, was here as well. I could feel the signature of his magic like heat against my skin. Dumbledore turned his head toward me. His eyes met mine across the cold expanse of stone. The request he had made weeks ago, the verdict he had pronounced, the role he had assigned me, all of it crystallized in that single glance. There was no plea in it, only a command. A final one. I moved. Draco froze, relief and horror warring across his features. The others stepped back, making room for the inevitable. My wand rose. My face remained expressionless. Severus, please. Not a supplication, a reminder. The words struck with the force of prophecy. I raised my wand, feeling the vow tighten with razor precision around my chest. And, without hesitation, without tremor, without mercy, I cast the spell that ended Albus Dumbledore's life. The flash of green illuminated the tower for a heartbeat, and then he fell, drifting backward over the edge like a discarded robe. The sound of his body striking the ground far below never reached my ears. Bellatrix shrieked in triumph. Draco staggered. The tower itself seemed to exhale a long, broken sigh. I turned away from the battlements and strode toward the stairs. The night had not finished with me yet. June 20th, 1997. The night after the Astronomy Tower is a blur of cold air, running footsteps, and the muffled roar of spells colliding behind us. Yet certain images remain carved into my mind with perfect, merciless clarity. The fall, the flash of green light reflected in Potter's widened eyes, Draco's staggering breath as he registered the extinguishing of the one figure who might have spared him, and then, perhaps most vividly of all, the castle itself, exhaling a long, tremulous shudder, as if something ancient had been severed within its foundations. We fled through corridors that no longer felt familiar. The torches sputtered violently, dimming as we passed, as though recoiling from us. Portraits hid in their frames, curtains drawn shut in cowardice or grief. Even the staircases moved with erratic unpredictability, their shifts frantic, panicked, an architectural spasm rather than their usual languid rotation. Hogwarts knew. The castle, in whatever manner such things possess awareness, felt the loss. Draco ran ahead of me for most of the descent, his breathing ragged, uneven. He did not speak, not a word. On the tower his voice had been frantic, pleading, desperate to escape the impossible crossroads laid before him. Now he resembled something emptied, hollowed out in an instant, as though his insides had been scraped clean and replaced with shock. Each time he stumbled, he caught himself with a jerk of instinct rather than intention. Behind us, the Death Eaters clamored in chaotic revelry. Bellatrix shrieked with laughter as she hurled hexes indiscriminately down the corridors. Her joy at our success so grotesquely exuberant it nearly drowned out the distant sounds of resistance. Greyback howled as he bounded through the halls, searching for prey. Others shouted in triumph, in disbelief, in something close to ecstasy. Their celebration was obscene, predictable, and nearly unbearable. Potter pursued us, of course. His footsteps slapped stone with wild abandon, his breath audible even beneath the din. Fury radiated off him like heat, palpable even at a distance. Childish, blind fury, the kind that has no strategy, no control, only raw emotion. He fired curses with reckless aim, most of which ricocheted off the walls, or were swatted aside by Death Eaters too eager for spectacle to let him fall just yet. I blocked several of his spells myself, not to protect Draco, but to maintain the integrity of the role I now inhabit. A killer fleeing the scene does not falter, does not choke, does not hesitate. My wand moved of its own accord, deflecting hexes with curt motions so efficient they bordered on contempt. Potter shouted at me. Accusations, grief, rage, all tangled in a voice that cracked repeatedly. Though I did not turn toward him. I felt every word like a brand pressed to the skin. His hatred settled on me with a weight I had anticipated for years and yet was still unprepared to bear. He demanded that I fight him. He demanded an explanation. He always demands answers he has no right to. And then, with a voice raw enough to scrape bone, he called me a coward. That word, so poorly aimed, so blindingly ignorant, struck with more force than any curse he could have conjured. I turned then, just long enough for him to see the truth of the moment, if not the truth beneath it. Not the truth I must never speak. You dare use my own spells against me. I snarled, not out of anger at him, but at the boy who had wielded pieces of my past without permission, who had nearly killed Draco with my own creation, who had ripped open scars I thought long buried. The irony was a bitterness I could not entirely contain. My rebuke sent him reeling, but not enough to silence him. Potter is incapable of silence in the presence of pain. As we neared the school grounds, the fighting behind us intensified. Spells cracked through the night like thunder, their light reflecting off the lake in fractured patterns. Somewhere Minerva's voice rose in a commanding roar. Hagrid bellowed. A figure crashed through the window of a lower corridor. The battle had swallowed the school, but our task was done. Bellatrix ignited Hagrid's hut with a delighted shriek, the flames roaring upward in a grotesque imitation of celebration. Draco flinched at the sound, at the heat, at the violence, every part of him trembling. He had wanted none of this. He had not chosen triumph, only escape. The dark mark burned faintly, a low simmer now rather than the earlier blaze. The Dark Lord had felt the moment, knew, approved. The boundaries of the castle gave way, and the grounds opened wide beneath the cold night sky. Beyond the gates, the world felt darker, emptier, stretched thin as though morning. We reached the edge of the school's protections. Apparition hummed beneath the air like a ready snare. I grasped Draco by the arm. The Death Eaters vanished one by one. And then the familiar wrench seized us, pulling us from the scorched grass, from the smoke rising in columns behind us, from the castle that had just lost its last true protector. We landed on a barren hillside miles away. The Death Eaters roared with triumph, Bellatrix capering like a grotesque child. Greyback sniffed the air like a hound. The sky above us churned with clouds that reflected none of the turmoil below. Draco collapsed to his knees, his breath hitching but no tears falling. He had none left. I stood rigidly beside him, the night wind biting through my robes, the weight of the act settling deeper with every breath. The spell, the fall, the finality. Dumbledore was dead, by my wand, by my hand, and the path ahead, dark, narrow, inevitable, now stretches before me, illuminated only by the cold glow of the dark marked. July 3rd, 1997. There is a peculiar quiet that follows acts of brutality, a silence that feels less like peace and more like the reluctant settling of dust over a battlefield. The weeks since Dumbledore's death have been steeped in that suffocating hush, punctured only by the shrill laughter of those two enthralled by their own violence to recognize the cost of what has been lost. The Dark Lord greeted our return with a calm that bordered on rapture. Not triumph, not yet, but anticipation sharpened to a blade's edge. His pleasure was cold and contained, revealed only in the tightening corners of his mouth and the brightness of his unnatural eyes. Celebration is beneath him. Instead, he surveyed Draco and me with the measured attention of a craftsman inspecting his tool. Draco fared poorly under that scrutiny. He trembled openly. His face was the color of wax. He stood beside me, barely upright, his shoulders hunched as though expecting a blow. And yet the Dark Lord did not strike. Perhaps he enjoyed the spectacle of fear more than the satisfaction of punishment. Perhaps the success of the mission, our success, earned Draco a temporary reprieve. Or perhaps the Dark Lord sees in him something useful still. A fragile pawn may yet be maneuvered into one last sacrificial square. He spared Draco, for now. Bellatrix, however, has wasted no opportunity to torment him in Voldemort's stead. She circles him like a starved jackal, delighting in each flinch, each twitch of panic. She praises him with sharp, mocking sweetness, as though congratulating a child for successfully reciting half a spell incorrectly. Draco avoids her gaze at all costs. The effect is almost pitiful. My own position has shifted in ways both sharp and subtle. I am no longer merely a spy in their ranks. I am the man who killed Albus Dumbledore, a deed that elevates me in their eyes to a level of esteem I find nauseating. They look at me with something approaching reverence, though their reverence is the kind born from terror rather than respect. The Carrows now defer to me in conversation, seeking my approval. Yaxley nods stiffly as if acknowledging an equal. Even Bellatrix, who once doubted my every breath, now stares at me with a feverish hunger, as though attempting to decipher the magic that allowed me to strike down the only wizard she ever feared. Her suspicion has not lessened. It has mutated. She accepts that I killed Dumbledore, but she wants to understand how and why, and in what state of loyalty. She will never understand the truth. She is incapable of comprehending any motive not born from cruelty or ambition. Draco clings to me when others are not watching, quietly, pathetically, as though proximity to the architect of Dumbledore's death might somehow shield him from the wrath that hovers over him like a storm cloud. His relief at being spared is eclipsed only by his terror of what comes next. The boy sleeps little. He eats less. His hands shake whenever Voldemort enters the room. He is a shadow cast by his own choices. The Death Eaters speak openly now of assaults long deferred, on the Ministry, on the Order, on the remnants of Hogwarts resistance. They speak with gleeful anticipation, like wolves finally unleashed. Voldemort allows their chatter, though he listens only to fragments. His silence is more unnerving than their mania. He watches the room with the slow patience of a predator who already knows the outcome of the hunt. His attention lingers on me with particular weight. Approval, perhaps. Ownership, certainly. In quieter moments, I reflect briefly, privately, on the nature of what has been lost. Dumbledore's absence as a wound felt even here in these darkened rooms. The world seems dimmer without him, as though some invisible stabilizing force has collapsed. Even the magic in the air feels heavier, more volatile. Two sides of a war brace for impact, neither yet fully aware of how the balance has shifted. News from Hogwarts arrives sporadically through channels that must remain unspoken. Minerva has taken charge of the school's remains. The Order is rallying, fractured but not broken. Potter has vanished from the remnants of the castle, his grief and fury no doubt fermenting into something more dangerous. He will blame me until his dying breath. That cannot be helped. It is, in fact, essential. I avoid dwelling on the tower, the moment, the curse, the green flare against stone, the look in Dumbledore's eyes, an unspoken acceptance that lingers in memory like a scar that refuses to heal. The more I force myself into the role the Dark Lord desires, the more tightly I must bury the image. There is no room for hesitation, no room for grief. These luxuries would kill me faster than any curse, and yet still they surface in cracks, in faint tremors, in the kind of silence that follows when one retraces steps that cannot be undone. Tonight, Draco sits on the far edge of the room, knees drawn to his chest, eyes fixed on the floor. He is not crying. He has moved beyond that. He simply stares, as though hoping the ground might swallow him. The others ignore him until they need him. I cannot help him. I cannot guide him. My role demands distance even when distance feels cruel. The Dark Lord has summoned me for tomorrow. The summons arrived with a soft, cold pressure against the mark, a reminder that my path is narrowing again. He will want counsel, plans, updates, and loyalty above all. I will give him what he requires. This is the aftermath, a landscape reshaped by a single act. The world stirs in its sleep, unaware of the coming storm, and I stand at its center, bound to a purpose that darkens with every passing day. July 31st, 1997. The air tonight carries the heaviness of a held breath. Summer should warm the stones, but the corridors of Hogwarts, my Hogwarts now, by decree neither earned nor desired, remain unnervingly cool. The torches burn steadily along the walls, though their light feels strained, as though attempting to imitate a warmth that no longer exists. The castle recognizes the vacancy. It knows who is gone. It knows who stands in his place. The Headmaster's office remains sealed to me, responding to my presence only with a cold, inert stillness. The gargoyle admits me now, but that is a mechanical obedience, not acceptance. The portraits tracking my movements do so with thinly veiled resentment, some whispering among themselves, others turning their backs as I pass. Only a few remain neutral, those who served headmasters of darker eras, bound to long cycles of shifting power. Even they watch with an alert wariness, as though waiting to see whether I am predator or prey. Dumbledore's portrait hangs behind the desk now, eyes closed in a semblance of sleep. He offers no counsel, no acknowledgement, only silence. Even in death, he preserves his distance. He will, eventually, but the castle denies that transition for reasons I do not fully understand. Perhaps because his death, though absolute, has not yet settled into permanence. Perhaps because the castle itself recoils from the memory of the tower. Or perhaps because even death hesitates to claim a wizard of his magnitude. I stand in the circular room longer than necessary, the smell of dust and old parchment settling around me, the shadows stretching with the slow creep of twilight. The space feels both familiar and unsettlingly foreign. His things remain where he left them, maps folded on the desk, quills arranged in their silver rest, a few scattered lemon drops melting quietly in a ceramic dish. None of it belongs to me. None of it ever will. I touch nothing. I disturb nothing. I am a trespasser playing a role required by war. Below, the ground spread out in stillness. The lake glitters faintly under the dying sliver of daylight. The forbidden forest hums with slow, nocturnal light. The Quidditch pitch stands abandoned, its hoops catching the dimming sky like skeletal silhouettes. It is a scene unchanged, yet everything beneath it has fractured. The governors have ratified the Dark Lord's will. I am to serve as headmaster. The word feels hollow in my mind. A title draped over a man who long ago forfeited any illusions of authority or autonomy. This appointment is not a reward. It is a strategic placement, a test, a leash. Voldemort requires an overseer who can command the staff, manage the students, and maintain order under new, tightening strictures. He trusts no one, least of all me. Yet he values the space I occupy, an academic veneer masking an encroaching regime. The Carrows will arrive soon. They will assist with curriculum and discipline. Their presence will rot the edges of this place. The thought of their crude hands on these corridors, on these children, on this castle's ancient magic fills me with a cold I do not allow to surface. I will manage them, control them, contain them, or, more likely, fail to do so at the speed the Dark Lord demands. Draco remains in Malfoy Manor, alive, physically unmarked, yet hollowed out to the point of translucence. I think of him only when forced. The boy has fulfilled his role as far as the Dark Lord is concerned. Now he is a vessel of fear, trembling at every shadow. He will recover, or he will not. There is nothing left for me to do. Potter, today marks his birth. 17, a year of majority in the wizarding world, old enough, in the eyes of this war, to die without fanfare. He is somewhere beyond these walls now, hidden, hunted, preparing for the impossible. He hates me with a purity that would almost be admirable if it did not burn so sharply. That hatred is a shield I built for him, crafted through necessity, through blood, through the tower. He will cling to it until the path Dumbledore left for him forces a reckoning neither of us will witness. The Dark Lord grows restless. His impatience poisons the air like a slow, spreading toxin. He prepares strikes against the Ministry, against the Order, against anyone who stands between him and Potter. The chessboard shifts daily, and I stand at the center, bound by secrets I can neither speak nor relinquish. Tonight, as twilight settles into full darkness, I walk the perimeter of the castle once more. The stones beneath my boots hum faintly, an old magic, weakened but not extinguished. Hogwarts endures, as it always has. Its strength is ancient, stubborn, resistant. Perhaps it will outlast even this. Perhaps. My role is clear. My face must remain cold, void of hesitation. I am the headmaster now, a guardian in appearance, a jailer in practice, a spy in truth. The duality is suffocating, yet unavoidable. The wall narrows, funneling all paths toward a climax neither side fully understands. I extinguish the final torch in the corridor with a quiet flick of my wand. The darkness closes in. Tomorrow the Carrows arrive. Tomorrow the staff returns. Tomorrow the school opens under a rain no one will recognize. Tonight is the last moment of stillness this castle will know for a long time, and one Severus Snape, murderer, protector, traitor, headmaster, stand at the threshold of a year carved from shadows. The darkness gathers, and I step into it.